Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to NERx, the 2022 Annual Virtual Convention of the Northeast Region of the NMRA. I'm Pete Watson, and I'll be your host here tonight for the final night of our model railroading program. Tonight, we have two clinics, two layout visits, and a roundtable discussion for you. I'd like to encourage you to not only watch and listen to our clinics and tours this week, but also don't forget to share your comments and ask questions using the chat window in the YouTube or on Facebook. All of our presenters tonight are in layout to our host for NERx, are model railroaders and members of the NMRA's Northeastern region. This is an area that includes the 6 New England states, Metro New York City, most of upstate New York, the top half of New Jersey, and let's not forget our friendly neighbors to the north and all of Eastern Canada, including the Atlantic provinces and also Newfoundland and Labrador and Quebec. Our sponsor for this year's NERx is Miniprints. Miniprints is an NMRA partner that produces 3D printed animals, figures, and oddities. And there will be a drawing tonight for a $50 gift voucher that will end tonight at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. To register, you can go to nerx.org and scroll down to the mini print section and click on the link, or watch for a post in the Facebook and YouTube chats, which will also have a link. The drawing will take place at 9 p.m. So if you're ready, let's start tonight's program. Our first clinic is Layout Design Considerations to Optimize the Experience of Operation by Jim Heidt. Jim is a proud fourth generation railroader, and in his youth, Jim worked on the family business, the 25-mile-long Ogdensburg and Norwood Railway from 1967 to 1972, which was the westernmost part of the Rutland. The family's deeper experience was on the NYO&W, so when Jim imagineered his model O&N concept during the late 1970s, he backdated the model railroad to 1948 and extended into a Class 1 freelance railroad, which has been a 27-plus year-long project with dear friends. Jim is now a retired New York trial lawyer, keeping active, serving 2 parishes as an Episcopal priest, and will hopefully find full-time modeling in his future. He has 2 children, 2 grandchildren, and is married with Maribeth Seaman, a high school sweetheart who also rode on the real O&N years ago. So, Jim, if you're ready, Speed, I think we can go ahead and play the video, and we'll take it away.
Let's go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Ogdensburg and Norwood Railway. And it's my pleasure as Jim Heidt, the president of the line, to join with you for this clinic during our NERx time together, layout design considerations to optimize the experience of operation. Glad that we could be together today. This is a pretty good long PowerPoint, so let's get going. So let's assume that before anything, your final layout construction goal is to operate it, operating either on your own or with family or friends. And the argument I want to make in this clinic is that an operating model railroad layout is actually theater, and ask you to compare the parallels. Both attempt to transport the experience and imagination of the audience to somewhere else in time and space. Both the operating layout and theater use basic background and scenery to start that imaginary process. But most importantly, both also seek to force the audience to be more than spectators. The idea is to change your guests instead into becoming emotional and attentive participants in the story being told through multiple sensations using lighting, sound, set or stage manipulation, which we do, of course, with our scenery, with moving trains, all of it. The goal is to maximize the experience of others. And we do that by manipulating the environment in detail. And we want to reach that goal by being intentional about it right from the outset in our design. So let's consider model railroad layout design in the context of theater, set, or stage design. What I want to try to do with this clinic is to show 3 different things to get us from being spectators to participants. Show the challenges met, hoping we do, in mating the factors of layout design, the available space, and traffic concepts. Secondly, let's tackle our layout room physical realities. We all have that, manipulating them for maximum viewing imaginary effectiveness. And finally, before construction, we want to be prioritized and open-minded in thinking about the options that we have to create this total experience by our operators and viewers. All right, so let's start with mating the factors of design, space, and traffic concepts. So as the general want list for my own Ogdensburg and Norwood as an example, I wanted a steam transition era Class 1 bridge line in upstate New York. So that basically got me to thinking about the St. Lawrence River Valley and the Adirondack Mountains in New York State. Secondly, I wanted to have interchanges with prototype era specific railroads. And I also wanted to have lots of online switching for relevant locals and way freights. Now, you may know that back in the 40s, when we're talking about running here, milk traffic to the metropolitan areas was a big deal. So, for example, milk trains. Iron ore was commercially mined in the Adirondacks through the 1950s. So I want to have iron ore traffic. And then, of course, the Canada to New England and back bridge line. So the available space that I have, which really is very large, I've got a huge layout here. It's over 400 feet long in main line alone. I'm still only going to be able to model the Northern Division, which was going to include a car ferry, imaginary, fictional, over the St. Lawrence, and an ore dock, again, fictional, and then having staging areas for all these different places where we're going to have interchange. And then third, what appeals to me personally is long, linear, single line, mainline trackage. No spaghetti bowl, no repeat scenes, because it was first thing for me was to force the illusion of actually going somewhere. So given the space that I had and the height I have in the basement, that I'm blessed here with an old home with the ceilings being really like 8 feet or 10 feet high, I could have a double deck point to point with a connecting helix to allow for long distance running. All right, so here's a map of the state. The line in green is the Ogdensburg and Norwood. The namesake of the railroad is Ogdensburg up on the St. Lawrence there. You see east of Norwood. That was the real railroad my family had when I was a kid. But I backdated it to 1948, and I'm running it all the way down to Pittsfield in Massachusetts to be a bridge line between Canada and New England. And you'll see the different communities it runs through and the different interchanges with, again, those prototypical 1940s era railroads that existed: the Central, the Lackawanna, the O&W, D&H, B&M, the Rutland, the New Haven. Okay, let's go on. So here's a quick view. I want to get through this quick of the track plan so you get an idea what we're looking at here. It's point to point, helix in the middle. Here's Ogdensburg, and you see the 3 red lines that represents staging in Canada. There's actually 9 tracks there in 3 different levels. And that's not modeled at all. And it runs behind the blue, which is all the St. Lawrence and Ogdensburg and the ore dock and all that, and comes out into the rest of the layout. That's in the bottom right-hand corner, the dash line coming into Lisbon, up into Madrid, and in the North Country, by the way, it's pronounced Madrid, not Madrid, into Norwood. And we'll talk about Norwood in detail in a bit. Continuing through Norwood, and then, by the way, all the black lines are the Ogdensburg and Norwood. The other colors are interchanges. Into Potsdam. Around Potsdam, we start on the grade, going up into the Adirondacks, crossing Hanover Falls, Trestle, through Colton, and then past South Colton into the helix. And here is the upper level. Now the upper level is exactly the same as the lower level in terms of its bench work and all of that. So it's just a mirror image of the other. There's the helix in the bottom left-hand corner. And you see that's in red, and that's because it's a New York Central staging that's built on the top of the helix. So the dashed line next to the helix is the main line of the O and N coming out of the lower level into Tupper Lake, Axton, Long Lake, Blue Mountain Lake. You can see the Blue Mountain in the upper right-hand corner. The dashed line coming out of there is the branch line into the ore mines, which is just staging. Continuing around on the main to Indian Lake, wrapping around that barrier down to Lake Pleasant, where there's another dash line coming off. And that's our railroad's branch line to Utica. And Utica in the 1940s was the major classification yard in upstate New York with the New York Central and other connecting lines. So we want to tie into that. Continuing out, and then Speculator, and then Wells, and then dropping back off this view back over the top of where Ogdensburg was. Now we're in the Northville. Northville is has a engine complex, and that's because it's a division point. And this is where the Southern Division begins by crossing the causeway over the Great Sacandaga Reservoir and continuing into staging, which is the Southern Division. So that's the layout. All right. So we talked about double deck, and right away I had to get creative in dealing again with the room that we had. So intuitively, in general, we think, when we think north to south, we think up to down. And that's because we look at a map that way. North is always up on the map, south is always down. Same thing on a compass. So when I first thought about this, I thought, well, so it wouldn't be confusing with operators. I ought to have the St. Lawrence Valley on the upper deck because it's north. And I'd have the Adirondack Mountains on the lower deck because it's south. But the stage design suggested otherwise because the static on the whole thing was my eye level. I am 5'9" tall, and everything in this whole layout is based upon that fact. If you're going to have a double deck layout, which you want to operate and you want to be able to see, you're going to have to consider having your track work on the upper deck in a place where you can see it. So all of my track work, mainline track on the upper deck really is about 2 inches or so below my eye level. So I had to flip it. So here we go. This is the scene. There's 2 levels. The bottom is Norwood in the St. Lawrence River Valley. The upper part you're looking at is Lake Pleasant down in the corner down there. And there's the front of the lake that you're looking at. Now, I talked earlier about the ceilings here. I'm blessed with high ceilings in this old Victorian home, and I use that to full advantage. But the idea was I decided to invert this and have the Adirondack views on the top part of the layout because I wanted to pay honor to the image of the height of the mountains in the Adirondacks. Then I'd have almost unlimited elevation on the upper deck because of the ceiling height here. I could make those mountains nice and high. So that's the reason with this is flipped, is to help create this real view of mountains, which with the trains travel through and would only be a scene, something passing through these scenes. And that's the reason why this whole thing was flipped the way it was in terms of the valley being on the bottom and the mountains being on the top. All right, let's move on. Enough of that. Norwood. Let's be specific now in terms of available space and concepts and all that. Norwood, in the 40s, Norwood was the interchange between the New York Central, the Rutland, and a short line railroad that went up to Waddington on the river. Of course, I'm putting in the O&N, backdating it, sticking it in the mix. Now, there's parts of this that are going to be hidden behind the backdrop. And the idea again is to have selected scene entrances by the various players, different railroads in and out of interchange, trackage rights, and so on, and actually including non-functioning trackage as stage props. So for example, here's the floor plan, track plan. The green arrow is the view you're going to be looking at shortly here at Norwood. The black lines on this thing are all Ogdensburg and Norwood Main Line. The red up at the top is the Rutland. The brown down below on the 6 lines and then coming up and extending out is the NERx Central. If you look at the view following the green arrow, the NERx Central comes into view halfway there and then just disappears off the layout, just for a very short view. The Rutland comes in and ties to it on an interchange, as frankly does the Ogdensburg and Norwood. We also go in through that interchange track you see at the top to go all into that staging down below. That's the reason why this view is expanded. Let's take another look here. Here's construction back in '98. The back track is a lead into Potsdam by the NERx Central from that same group of 6 staging tracks. That is going to be completely out of view here. The track in front of it is that NERx Central through line between Syracuse and Montreal, the secondary, just passing through on its way up to Montreal. And the front track is the Ogdensburg and Norwood Main Line. Here we go, same view, much later, scenic in that Potsdam access track is completely out of view here. You don't even see that. But we're starting to put in the structures to kind of hide the stage boundaries for everything else. And this is the way it looks now. And we're still working on the detailing. But again, being the St. Lawrence Valley, there's no tunnel portals here. So we're hiding things, edges of scenes with structures. And this is the Ogdensburg and Norwood Main Line right there in the front. In the back, you see the NERx Central secondary on its way up to Montreal. Now, this is a key idea of this is using structures to help do your scenery movie set edge scene restrictions, viewing restrictions. That brewery kit there hides the NERx Central and the Rutland track. That turnout that's next to it is permanently set for the curve coming into the view. And that track that's sitting next to that boxcar is completely inoperable. It's not even wired in. I will stick another car down in there. And the idea is to create this canyon of brick and structures and whatever to hide the view so that people won't be peeking down there to see the fact that the track just stubs into nothing. Let's talk about another town now, Tupper Lake. Tupper in the 40s was an interchange with the Adirondack division of the NERx Central, which today is still the Adirondack Scenic Railway. And they also, they had picked up the New York and Ottawa, and that was actually abandoned in '37, but I'm keeping it into play here for visionary purposes. There's a challenge here. It's not a very big area, and it comes off a stiff grade off the helix. And I also wanted to mix in staging from the Utica branch of the NERx Central. So we could have NERx Central trains coming off of Utica, running over Ogdensburg and Norwood track because of emergency, washout on the NERx Central, and then going back on the NERx Central trackage at Norwood, which we just showed you. So we got to deal with all of this. Let's look at it. Here's the track plan, the forward plan. Down in red is the helix, and it's in red because that shows just the top of the helix with the staging for the NERx Central. Comes into view and it crosses the O&N on the diamond at Tupper. And then you see there's a little stub that goes off into the corner there in red while the O&N continues on. Here's the view looking toward the helix, which is out of sight. And there's the diamond right in front of the station. And you see the track that's in the very good foreground. That's the interchange. If you look closely, you'll see that the color of the ballast is different on the NERx Central interchange track in the foreground and the Ogdensburg and Norwood mainline track, which is closer, running parallel, it's closer to the station. And I did that intentionally with the ballast to help show the distinction between the two roads. Now this is looking the other way past the station. And we had to really get creative with this. I worked on this pretty hard here. This is a subtrack going nowhere, but the idea was to give the impression that it's coming from somewhere. And up into the Adirondacks, up to Moira, and eventually up to Ottawa. In any event, I had to close that in because we weren't going to make it operable. So you'll notice the trees kind of hug in there. I've got that F unit sitting there with some derelict cars behind it, just sitting there for scenery. And then the whole thing's topped by this, you can just barely see it, this small highway bridge. And the whole idea is to just force the view, to give the impression to the viewer there's something going on there while nothing's really going on there in a very limited space. Okay, here's the helix, and there's the top of the helix with 2-track staging for the NERx Central and Utica. All right, so we're done with that first part. Let's talk about tackling layout room physical realities and how we manipulate them. I want to go back to the wish list for this railroad. I wanted long, linear, single-track mainline track to make it look like it's going somewhere. But the great truth of our hobby is we never have enough room, ever. And it is much worse when you have long runs of track. I've got long aisle layouts. So how can I manipulate the realities of this layout to help fool the eye of you if you're visiting, to make it look like you're going somewhere? Again, I want to use theater set theory. Interrupt the line of sight, even for just a nanosecond, a moment. We do that with view blocks, which force your eyes to move away from the trains that are moving. Create scenic variations to distract viewer concentration, even by doing it slightly. Again, even though it's so minimal, the difference in ballast color, what I already talked about, for example. And consider the visually unusual, which things that are counterintuitive in our layout design. We'll talk about that when we get further along, but here we go. Longest aisle on the layout is about 30 feet. Axton, Long Lake, Blue Mountain on the upper. And of course, because the bottom is identical, we've got Potsdam, Hanover Falls down below. We got an additional obstruction on this right halfway down where you see Station Hotel, right in the middle of that. There's we got a problem in our ceiling area, a cast iron soil pipe from the toilets upstairs going out to the septic tank. It drops in elevation and into such a way that it gets in the way. So I'm going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We're going to cover the soil pipe and we're going to break up that long 30 long foot eye view with a short mountain tunnel. So here we go. Years ago, Bill Brown is here on my request. There you see the soil pipe on the left. We're going to put this mountain that's going to bump out with its chunks of styrofoam. So he's starting to work around here. And there you see the soil pipe in the upper right-hand corner, and it's being covered up here by the styrofoam. Well, that's the view today. And again, it breaks up your eye. You're following the train along and you have to, come around here and see it again. And it just doesn't make that aisle as long as it was. All right. Now below that long level, we've got this trestle. And even though it's open view, the fact is that because it's something different and it's dramatic, I think that it's the best we can do in having open trackage of just causing you to think differently, that it's just not one big long piece of track on roadbed, but something different to, again, break up the idea of the long aisle view. Now, on the other side of the aisle, we've got Blue Mountain Lake down to Indian Lake. And underneath that is Potsdam. Well, we don't have any problems here with room obstructions, but what are we going to do? Well, here's the senior construction going in at Indian Lake down to Blue Mountain Lake. Styrofoam sections with paper towel soaked with Structolite over the top of it for lightweight scenery. And there's the scene now, or relatively now. We got a bridge in there, so we cut out a piece of the roadbed to put the bridge in, and it goes into a cut. And the track does not run right up hard against the edge of the layout, but it curves in and out, so you can scenic in there intentionally to break up the eye, to break up the view, to make the aisle not as long, but the image think that the run is actually longer. Potsdam is down below. You can see that. In Potsdam, being a yard, there's nothing I could do about that. So we've got the Racket River and put in these bridges and a hydroelectric plant that's going in behind it. And there's a lot more work that's been done on it since this picture was done. There's a whole story about this, which I'm not going to have the time to tell you, but maybe we'll get to that at some point. All right, let's go on. So around the curve now, we're looking at the rest of this. We already looked at this once before, Indian Lake to Lake Pleasant. And there's a bridge on coming out of Indian Lake, and what? Another cut before you see the Lake Pleasant shoreline with Lake Pleasant Hamlet in the corner down there. That cut is just there to break up your eye. It's not there for any other reason than that, designed intentionally. But down below it, we have Norwood. Norwood's a different story. And it got challenging because after really the layout had been built, and we were really getting going here, there was a very late layout design issue. And I realized that we needed to stick in some kind of an additional staging area for Rutland trains. It's necessary for the concept of the operation of the layout. I couldn't hide this staging in some way like I had the others. This thing is going to be an open view. What am I going to do? So I added 2 stub tracks along the backdrop, which had to be hidden. And we did that with industrial structures containing those staging tracks, which those structures also offered switching out in front of them. And there was also structure placement away from the backdrop, which I'll show you in a second, which kind of hid the entrance. So here's when we were first building it. Spline lattice, roadbed onto our benchwork and risers and whatnot. And here we go. Here's the scene now. Obviously, we took that roadbed out once it got settled to put that trestle in. But this is a wonderful view of the whole expanse of Norwood to give you the idea between the trestle and that scratch-built structure, which is a threshing company, just a machinery outfit. That thing was built up intentionally with the stack to be the most momentarily view block, so you're not actually watching the train the whole time. And then in the background, you see 2 large industrial structures, some of them lighted up and whatnot. That is the Rutland staging. This is back when we were building it. And this is more recent. Now you see that there above the roof of the station, we've got a 4-story brick structure with one next to it. Those were built and installed specifically for the purpose of being a view block, so you could not see the Rutland trains coming out of buildings, but all of a sudden they're in view. It's a view block. All right, now Speculator on the upper deck didn't have a long aisle, but you notice that it kind of bumped in. The area in black is the brick wall that was set in. So we could be creative here. We didn't have to run the track right out along the layout edge and fill in behind it with the scene and the switching. We decided to reverse it so that the main line ran in the background and could be hidden by the structures in the front to be out of view. Here's Bernie Messenger and Bob Ryan early on testing it. And you see the track is going in the background away from everything. This is a more recent view, and you see structures are starting to fill in, and the water tank in the back there is where the main goes. And then here we go. This is now. Switching's in the foreground. The main is hidden behind the milk plant, the coal tower, and other stuff going further along the line. Going on back over toward the Ogdensburg Northville wing of this layout, you see double view here. There's Ogdensburg Yard down below, and up above it is Northville. And there's this big long aisle that does nothing. So I really, it comes back to me. To the left of this, which you can't see, is a piece of Allen McClellan's Virginia and Ohio Railroad called Dawson Spring. It's a long story how I was able to get my hand on a chunk of that railroad, but that piece of his layout is in this layout, and it looks different from the other end that you can see, which is Northville. Northville with its engine facilities and its division point and all that, completely different. So I wanted to hide the transition by putting in this giant cut, which would break up the view. All right, that's looking down the cut. And this whole thing, by the way, comes off. This piece on the left detaches with just a few sheet metal or sheetrock screws, and boom, the whole thing pulls off for maintenance and whatnot. All right. And finally, we got Ogdensburg. Here's the main line toward Ogdensburg, and you see the St. Lawrence on the right, the ore dock sitting in there with the marine terminal. And the trains disappear behind that marine terminal, theoretically going on a car ferry going into Canada and staging. The ore dock, I've yet to finish putting in the bridge work and to wire that up so it'll be operational. But the approach to it also, here's the approach to it. It's the same thing. I want to hide it behind structures. So Ogdensburg is really industrialized, and we've got these structure fronts, and here's some mock-ups in addition to ones that are going into place, hiding all that trackage and the main lines in front. The last example in this whole category we're talking about is considering the unusual, visually unusual, the counterintuitive layout design feature. This is Indian Lake. And we saw the two railroad bridges over Cedar River already on a couple slides. And we want to think about the main line and how it runs and why. Well, here's the view. I call this inverse stage design. What we normally do is we think in terms of ascending vistas. Everything is lower in front where you're standing, and then it rises in elevation as you're looking at it. And that is the case often on this railroad, but not here. Here, we've got the right of way, and then Cedar River drops behind it, not in front of it. And then the mountain rises up on the other side of the river. Also, over to the left, we're starting to develop the hamlet here of Indian Lake. And there's Indian Lake Box. But I also want to sandwich the main line with the commercial district, which is going to sit right over there on the far left. You see the white ditch there with wiring for the structure lighting. But I'm going to put all kinds of structures in there and have that thing really crowded so it looks like a little small mountain holler type of community. Now, important to look at here, the placement of this thing was intentional because I think everybody loves a streamside mill scene. At least I do. The South River structure scenes, I just love them. Well, this is scratch built based upon some of those ideas, but the idea is being on the end of the aisle, it forces your eye into this very view, which takes your eye away from the main line, which is right in front of you for a moment, again, to extend the illusion of time. So that's it on tackling layout room physical realities. Just a few more pieces here about being prioritized and open-minded to our total experience. I believe strongly in separate layout lighting. The basement has its own fluorescent lighting system for shop lights and when we do our regular work, but the layout lights here are different. And it's a strange system. Nobody else does this anymore. I learned this from Dick Loomis many years ago, and I love it. 1156 auto bulbs, 12-volt bulbs used in old headlights, taillights. They're wired in serial circuits of 11 each, and I run 120 volts through them and dimmers, which are controlled by stepper motors, hooked up through the computer through JMRI, running on fast scale time clocks. So they vary. They often come up and down just like a theater lighting. Also, I can localize sound. I have a few of these on the layout. I'm going to introduce more. This is engineering, little sounds, and they're great. Sawmills, industrial, and my great caution for you in terms of the experience to focus is like in our locomotive sounds, don't make them too loud so that it overwhelms the whole thing and it causes people not to be focused right where they are. Adjust it for concentration on the scene. And then I have user-friendly accessories for operation. My turnout controls are a combination of PVC cap with lipstick tubes that are lighted by LEDs, bicolor LED, green for the main, yellow for the diverge. So you, as your brakeman operates the layout, he or she just turns that tube and it turns the turnout. We also have lighted town signs. So when things get darker, lets people know where they are. And then the fast clocks also are lighted so that it's easier for people to see what time it is. Again, it's the total experience. What else are we talking about? Well, I'm fascinated by this development of Arduinos. I want to get them involved with animation, at least crossing gates, and maybe also changing my interior structure lighting so that they'll be tied to the computer as to when they click on and off instead of just coming on when I turn on the 5 and the 12-volt supplies. And that's basically what I have. Do you have any other ideas? And a reminder to be creative because it's theater. And there we go. So I'm glad that you could join us today, and you're welcome to visit anytime that we have a ops till you drop operating session here in Central New York Division. Now that I'm basically retired, I'm open, and whenever we have convention here in Central New York, we hope that you come by. And I want to thank you for shipping on the Ogdensburg-Norwood Railway. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hello, friends. We're back at the Ogdensburg and Norwood for NERx. Jim Heidt with you again. It's my understanding that my earlier clinic was a little bit short, so we thought we'd fill in some holes and let's see what we can do. First, I wanted to share with you the construction of the Hanover Falls trestle. They're micro-engineering trestle kits, and there are at least 3 of them here. I had to use them to extend the middle towers there to 4 links. And this was assembled across 3 separate Tuesday nights when I had my buddies over. And what we did once it was all together, we used a 1x2 piece of wood, which was 8 feet long, and we piggybacked this thing underneath the 1x2. And the 1x2 rested on either end here. This is the high end over here, because this is on a grade, and this is heading downgrade toward Potsdam. So there's Hanover right there. So the whole thing was all assembled, ready to go. And you wonder, how did we get it into place? Well, here are plaster stone foundations that I had made, just a piece of plaster carved out and stained or painted, I don't recall which. And you'll see them resting on the bottom of each one of these towers as I try to get closer. So once we figured out where they were actually going to have to be placed, what we did is we dug a little foxhole where each one of these was going to go. And so when this whole thing was suspended in place, these stone foundations were actually hanging in air from the bottom of these towers. And my buddies got together on a Tuesday night. We made up a real bucket brigade of soupy cups of plaster, small cups, and just started pouring it in and bringing up the plaster in the cavity until it took a hold. And I tell you what, plaster Paris, it set up in a big hurry. But I'm very pleased how that worked out. But if you run into that issue, try it that way. And I thought there might be some questions about the turnout control. This is 1948 on this railroad. We run by train order timetable. And so each operator has to operate his or her own turnouts. And that is a simple PVC cap out of the plumbing supply of the big box stores with a loose lipstick tube that is mounted inside of it. Now I'll turn it around here so you can see the guts of this thing. And I'm hoping that comes out all right. The idea is that the rotary motion of turning the lipstick tube turns into lateral motion to throw this wall switch that you can see. And the wall switch obviously opens or closes a circuit, which fires off to the relays. And now it's only one relay for a tortoise motor. And also sends the change in the color of the bicolor LED mounted upside this brass tubing. So you can see it in the dark. This will light up green for the main line, yellow for the diverging route. And there's an article that's been proposed and submitted, so we'll see. And that gives the details on how they're built. And I'm very pleased with it in terms of the overall effect it has on our operations. Another distinctive piece of information about this layout is its lighting. As I said, I believe strongly in very good layout lighting. And this follows Dick Loomis. Now, Dick Loomis is a modeler who was in the Syracuse area here in Central New York Division. He was a career man with General Electric and knew his stuff. And he and Betty retired, moved back to their native Cape Cod, and they were involved in one convention that the NER had in Cape Cod. And one of the wonderful people that you get to meet at NER conventions and in relationship in our hobby. Anyway, Dick's whole layout was done this way, and I've not seen it done since, and I don't think there's anything that compares in my opinion. But so what we use is an 1156 auto bulb, which is the old-time bulbs used in taillights. You can still get them on eBay. Don't get the LED ones, but the real incandescent ones. And it's necessary to drill a 5/8 inch hole on this piece of 1x2. It's 1x2 lumber. Drill a 5/8 inch hole, but off center. You notice it's a little off center. And then later you come out with a saw and you cut out this notch to make like a little U. And then what that does, and you do that on 1 foot lengths, a foot apart. Let me spread that out so you can see it a little bit better. There we go. Dick did his in 6 inches, and I thought it was too bright. And I'll tell you on this layout, when the lights are up full, you cannot look at them. They are that bright. So here is a sketch that I made of the concept. The bulb, of course, sits up inside of that thing, of the wood, and then the red wire comes down and it's soldered to the top, and then you sweat solder another wire on the side going out to the next light bulb. So these are wired in series, and there are 11 of them to a circuit, and I run 120 volt AC, regular house current, through them, but because there's 11 of them, it's less than 12 volts at top voltage to each one of these, so it prolongs the length of the life of the bulb. Now, the adverse part of this is when one bulb burns out, the whole string goes out. So you have to find the spent bulb and you have to replace it. But I think that it's worth it given the benefits of the lighting. Here is the central command for the lighting. All those circuits come back to these stepper motors, which are all hooked up to dimmers inside of the boxes. And they are all connected to the computer through JMRI to move in time with the fast clocks. Here's a circuit that's turned off so you can get an idea what it looks like behind the fascia. And then finally, here is the staging at the end of the layout. The bottom is Canada. The top is the Southern Division. These are elevators. They move up and down independently on motors with little counters that count the number of chain links going by them, connected to a microprocessor back down here at the end. You push a button and it's supposed to go where it goes. And so Brian Curry, MMR, is the one who built this by welding together bed frame material. Mike Lamont gets the credit for doing the electrical work down at the end there. Charlie Albee has done some modifications also to take the sag out of it. And it really is the center of our operations. I'm very, very pleased with the effort and the help of all my friends to help us get to this point in our operation. So that's it. Hope you've enjoyed it. Let's see what other questions you may have.
Well, Jim, that was a great clinic. Thank you. I noticed some things in there that I think I'll be using on my own layout. I like the way that New York Central comes in from behind the buildings there. That's a great way to bring something in that, or even hide something departing that you need to deal with. And I've got a situation like that on my own layout that I'm trying to deal with now. So that's a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Good.
You mentioned that the Ogdensburg node was a real railroad run by your family when you were a kid. When was that, and what was the
right? Yeah. Well, when the Rutland had its final strike in 1963, the line, of course, was dormant, and they ended up tearing up all the track across New York State, from Rouse's Point all the way to Norwood. And the Ogdensburg Bridge and Port Authority continued the trackage from Ogdensburg to Norwood. And the line was basically dormant until my father showed up and started operating that as the short line Ogdensburg and Norwood. So it's the western 25 miles of the Rutland, westernmost 25 miles. And at that time, it was interchanged with the Penn Central at Norwood. And then there was of course, the Norwood and St. Lawrence was a short line, which was still operating at the time. Now that trackage is still in place and it's part of the Vermont Railway system.
Mm-hmm.
We had it for 5 years. And that's where my railroad time came in. I was on the books and I actually had some railroad retirement hooked up through, and it's a very proud time in my life to just be another person in the family that's gone on in that way.
Sure. Yeah. At Tupper Lake, you talked about emergency trackage rights to the New York Central over O&N tracks to get New York Central trains from Tupper Lake to Norwood and back. Why do that, and what's the foundation for that?
Well, I think I mentioned that my family were railroaders, and my grandfather, Louis Crawford, was the senior most fireman on the O&W and the Southern Division. So I grew up around all of my whole family were operators on the Ontario and Western. And I remember hearing stories about where there was a washout on the Erie along the Delaware somewhere, and that Erie trains had to run from Hancock on the way down to Middletown. And my grandfather, he's riding essentially as the pilot. And these Erie men, they couldn't get over the different condition of the track, and how these O&W guys were like crazy, just traveling over this road which should have been condemned. So I know that it's a sweet story that stayed with me, and I thought it's another way that I could get other trains to operate across this railroad of the right of way, integrating in New York Central, different power, first generation power, different cabooses, and It's just adding more trackage through, mixing things up. But that's
Mhm.
the backstory for it.
Cool. Um, how do you turn locos on the point-to-point layout?
I'm sorry, please.
How do you turn locomotives on your point-to-point layout?
Well, when we get to Ogdensburg and to Northville, both of those locations have engine facilities. So we're still developing that. We're hoping to add the improvements necessary to actually service the locomotives and turn them around in the way we're supposed to do it prototypically. Now, I'll admit to you, we haven't done that yet. But at this point, we have enough locomotives that we don't actually have to turn them to continue on a local going the other direction.
Mhm.
Um, when we operate, it's 3, maybe 4 hours in real time. So it ends up being about 12 hours fast time, scale time. And the locals are such that they don't interfere with each other. The north usually goes in one session and the south will go in the next. So that's that. I'm hoping we'll get to the point where we'll have to deal with that, but right now we don't.
Let's add some operational interest, won't it?
Oh
We
yeah.
had a question, but you pretty much got answered about when your layout was featured in on MR, and I think that got answered. I don't know whether there was anything else you wanted to add to that or not.
Well, I think I saw the comment. Angel Bernard answered it, and he was able to because we had talked about it. For some reason, there was an error at Kalmbach Publishing for that very issue, and as far as I know, in the history of Model Railroader magazine, that is the only issue where they made the mistake of putting the wrong date on the cover of the magazine. It is the wrong year. And it's the strange story is I remember taking the magazine up to visit with my mother-in-law, Helen Seaman, who at the time I think she was 95 years old. Showed it to her, and she's the one who who pointed it out for the very first time that what's the wrong year. And I called MR right away, and they were good. They admitted it.
Can't do much else, can you?
No,
Yeah,
no. So it's that's always the caveat I got to put in. Anybody who asks me,
yeah.
what issue is it in? Well, it's February 2017, but that's wrong. It's really 2018.
What does your bench work top consist of?
In terms of the elevation,
I
or do
think
you
that
just want it general
just
construction?
general. I think is what the question was.
Oh, okay, good. Well, down the peninsulas, I have studs that go from floor right up into the ceiling, which is they are 10 feet high here in the basement. And coming off of that are L girder T's. That the lowest one is about 30 inches off the floor. The second one up is again below my eye level, and there's a third one on top which holds the fascia for the upper level. And everything is cantilevered off of that. I can't say enough about the spline lattice construction system. It's an article that covered 2 issues back in 1970 from Model Railroader. I would not do it any other way. There's several layouts in central New York that have done it again since. In fact, Bill Brown was just in Indianapolis visiting with his son, Stephen, and they sent me a quick video. And Stephen, even now, is building his layout with spline lattice. But it's so strong, it's lightweight, it follows its own curves. I mean, it's beautiful, beautiful way to build it. So, and then on top of that, it's a 1/2 inch homosote. And then on top of that, I had Homa Bed, which is no longer made by Homa Bed. Back then, it was out of Kingston, New York, but it's still commercially available under other manufacturers today.
Mhm.
And then I use on the main line Code 70 Flex Track.
Yep.
All the
Yeah,
staging is Code 100, but the main line is Code 70.
yeah. I've actually started using the spline system myself, and it is, you're right, it's a great way of building a layout.
Absolutely.
Someone wants to know where you got all the lipstick holders.
Well, having no pride, I went to the dollar stores, and at that time, they're hard to find. I want to make sure that everybody understands that when we're talking about clear lipstick, it's the bottom end, the knob that you turn, that needs to be clear if you intend to light it up with bicolor LEDs like I do. Any number of lipsticks have the cap being clear, but that's not what you want. So literally, I mean, I went to the dollar store and the clerks always kind of looked at me like, what are you doing? But after that, I found them on eBay. And I just had written an article for publication, forwarded on to a magazine. So I've done some more research on it, and you can still buy them. You can find them online. Hopefully the article come out, and that's a detailed article on the construction. So let's see if that comes out.
All right. Well, very good. I see that our time is pretty much up. I want to thank you very much, Jim. It was a really interesting clinic, and it's been great seeing you again, and I hope to see you in the future.
I had a lot of fun doing this, and it's great. Thank you so much. I'm pleased with everybody's interest, and come and run the ONN sometime. Thank you, everyone.
All right. And we are back, ready to proceed on with the program. And our next part of the program is a roundtable discussion, Meet the Model Railroad Press. And join our editors, Chris Cafaro and Mac Brisbane of the NER Cupola, as they host the rest of the group. And I will let Chris introduce the others. And we'll have a discussion focusing on the impact of photography in the railroad press. And while we're at it, here's a reminder to ask your questions in the chat windows of YouTube and Facebook. Okay, Chris, it's all yours.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Hi, everybody. Welcome to NERx, the final night, and welcome to the Meet the Model Railroad Press. With us tonight, first, I'm Chris Cafaro, the editor of the NER Coupler. Next to me is Max Brisbane, our assistant editor. We have Cynthia Priest with the NMRA National Magazine, and we have Otto Van Drak with Railroad Model Craftsman. I'll let everybody introduce themselves and come back to me, and then we'll start on some questions. Cynthia, would you go first, then Otto, Max, then me?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Cynthia Priest, and I'm the NMRA Magazine editor. I've been involved with producing the NMRA Magazine since 2006, when my husband, Stephen Priest, was the editor, and then I took over the editorship back in 2014, when Stephen was charged with resurrecting and redesigning Railroad Model Craftsman. And that redesign is pretty well followed up to this day, which is great. And I was also at that time the editor of Railroad Model Craftsman. Railroads Illustrated. Got too many railroads and models and all that stuff. Railroads Illustrated from about 2007 to 2018. I also copy edited Model Railroad News for many years. I did the Mid-Continent Caboose Kibitzer for a couple of years, and I have written, co-authored, copy edited, and even ghost authored several books for our own publishing company, as well as other hobby related publications and publishers. So been in the business for quite a while.
That's super. Otto, you're up.
Thanks for having me here tonight, Otto Van Drak from Railroad Model Craftsman. But before I was at Railroad Model Craftsman, I used to work on a little newsletter called the Coupler from 2005 to 2009. Redesigned the Coupler, and that was a lot of fun. Been a member of the NER for a long time, and even though I'm up here in Rochester, New York, now we've just recently rejoined the NER, so that's kind of exciting to come full circle. I started working for these magazines actually back in 2010, starting with our sister publication, Railfin and Railroad, and I took over as editor of Railroad Model Craftsman in 2019. And for those of you who haven't seen the magazine lately, like Cynthia said, Stephen Priest put down a very nice foundation for us to build on. And we're looking forward to celebrating Railroad Model Craftsman's 90th anniversary in March 2023.
That is awesome. Max, you're up, buddy.
All right. Hello, everyone. I am the assistant editor of the NER Coupler. Before that, I truthfully haven't a ton of experience with model railroad publications. Most of my writing I did in college for Champlain College, and I've sent Otto a couple things his way in the past, and over a year ago, I think Chris asked me to be assistant editor for the NER Coupler, and it's been a really neat journey since. It's been quite a learning experience to to apply skills that I've learned to an actual magazine. Other writing experience I have is I've published a book called Abandoned Vermont, Dishevelment in the Green Mountains, which is a collection of photography and poetry about a bunch of abandoned buildings that are around the state of Vermont.
That is awesome. Thank you. Thank you. I'm Chris Cafaro. I've been in the NMRA probably close to 40 years, joining as a teenager with the Model Railroad Club, Inc. of Union, New Jersey. Getting to meet people like Paul Mallory and Bill Quinn, Chuck Laube. Laube's Linen Mill is named after Chuck Laube. Did you know that? Anyway, I've been around a while, submitted stuff to Stephen and Cynthia when they were turning the national publication for the NMRA through its iterations of scale rails and then into its present title. I've been photographing, taking pictures, modeling forever. And I'm a professional calligrapher, which is my full-time job. Anyway, that's me. We received a few questions before tonight, and one of the things I'd like us to look at is with these 3 publications, I think they have all become much more visually dynamic, certainly since Stephen came into Scale Rails, Cynthia, and then you grabbed it. Otto, you took the coupler from point A to B. Jeff Paxton then took it B to C, and I'm here. I'm getting a D on this. Anyway, but everybody has moved it much more visually stimulating, and I'm kind of curious what impact that has on the readers, what the readers have, what's the feedback, what are your subscription numbers, not so much what the numbers, but how does it impact you guys as a business, and something about the overall focus of the magazine. Cynthia, I'm going to ask you to go first, then Otto, Max, then me. Thanks.
All right. Well, making sure I'm off mute here. So in my opinion, people still make instant judgments about pretty much everything that they come in contact with. And that's basically on visual cues. And so what they see, they determine whether it's good or bad, or they're interested or not interested, if it's harmful or not harmful. And so what we want to do initially is to grab them with the cover and make that visually grabbing their attention, and then they'll move to the words. So that's the picture that's first going to grab their attention. It's whether it's the colors, it's the composition. Then they'll move to the words to see if they want to go even further into the magazine. So that you have to start out with a good cover, and then as they flip through the magazine, you want to have large images, and that's been our goal, is to have large images with pretty powerful and, most importantly, informative graphics, so that people can understand what they're reading and then what they're looking at, and better understand how things are built, how they're wired. We want to give them as much information about what it is that they're looking at, that so they'll dive into the actual reading of the article that's being presented. We do this in a way that you want to have some white space, so there's a little bit of breathing room. But if you get too artsy, people feel like, number one, it's not worth the price of whatever it's on, if it's electrons or if it's paper, because they're like, I paid for this content in some fashion, either with my time or with my dues or with my money, and I want to get something out of that. So they want to have a lot of information, and you can get a lot of information through having large images so they can see the details as well as the words. But you don't want to have too much information that it just is so busy that people are turned off by it. So it's a balance.
That makes sense. Where do you see, I'll come back to that. Otto, why don't you go ahead and take off?
I think a lot of what it comes down to is you want to give people an attractive product. Another project I was involved in years ago, if there's any OPSIG members on here tonight, I also worked on the Dispatcher's Office, which is the journal of OPSIG, came out 6 times a year. And when I was working on that, we did a complete redesign, and I purposely made it look like a professional journal. Um, Easy to read, plenty of photographs. Everything that's in OPSIG, which is the Operations Special Interest Group, was a lot of intense discussions on how to accurately model real railroad operations on a model railroad. And there was a journal already existing, but they were looking for something that looked a little bit more professional, polished, but not competing with, say, a model railroader or a railroad model craftsman, because it's a journal for a specific organization. And right away, when people saw the improved journal, and the fact that it was coming out on a regular basis on time, it got more people involved in OPSIG. Likewise, when I was working on the coupler back in the day, we had a great newsletter back in 2005. But a lot of the editors who were working on it then, they're looking to move on to something new. Again, I was available, already working in publications, and we gave the coupler a makeover, made it more visually appealing, made it look more professional. Again, not competing with the existing railroad magazines, but just giving the members something that made it felt like their membership dollars, they were getting something in return. Um, and then also when people saw the new improved product, more people started contributing to the coupler. And again, already the NER was a very large area covering Eastern New York, Northern New Jersey, and all of New England. Um, Very wide area to cover. And we weren't getting many contributions, if you could believe it or not. Once people saw the new and improved newsletter, more people got active. And I think that's really, and I think Cynthia touched on this a little bit too. All of our publications are about sharing information and bringing people together. Um, a lot of what Cynthia talked about, we still do at Railroad Model Craftsman. I grew up reading magazines. We all grew up reading magazines. They made an impression on us as we, journey through the hobby. And my job, I want to make sure, working with my staff, that we have an informative, engaging product, but also something that looks like it's worthy of your subscription dollars. That's the difference between when I'm working on Railroad Model Craftsman versus its dispatcher's office or the coupler. Railroad Model Craftsman is a commercial publication. We sell advertising to offset the cost of the publication, but for the most part, we're making sure that we are covering the the broad the broad horizons of the entire hobby, not just any one subject or scale or modeling era. So we have to put together a publication that appeals to everyone all the time. That sounds pretty easy, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. I'm sure everybody's happy.
All the time. No complaints.
No complaints. Max, what do you think?
Yeah, so to Cynthia's point about the covers being really an important aspect of a magazine, like, the way I think about it is like you only have a couple of seconds to grab somebody's attention. And to do that, you need to have a really visually stunning cover. And, the coupler, for instance, I have a couple of issues here, past and present, that kind of exemplify this. So what we've been working on is like really trying to find like a hero image, if I could give a good term to it. So that sort of like anchors the magazine and kind of like, it solidifies the content of what's going to be inside. So for example, these are two different issues of the coupler that are basically a year apart. So this is the newest one, which has an absolutely gorgeous photo on the front from Rick Abramson's massive New Haven railroad layout, and that's a 4-track bridge. It's absolutely tremendous. Compare that to how busy this looks from about a year ago. So yeah, I feel like it's really important to have that anchor that's going to pull people in, and you want somebody to be like, wow, like look at that, because thinking about like, who is this magazine for? Who is this going to reach? The NER Coupler magazine is for, all of us. It's for everybody who scale models, but also like, it has the potential to reach a larger audience. And I feel like one way to do that is to have a really bang on cover.
Max, could I add on to that? Because I think you hit on something really important. And again, the difference between membership publications and commercial publications. Um, for instance, the coupler goes out to all the members. We don't need to sell it to them. They're not going to the hobby shop to buy it. It comes as part of their membership benefit. The challenge that we have with a commercial magazine like Railroad Model Craftsman, um, one of the things this is so what you're seeing here, we send out two copies, two different versions of the magazine. The one that goes to subscribers has address box here, and the cover lines are a little different, um, because we're not selling it to the subscriber. They're already getting it whether they want it or not. It's already part of their subscription. But someone coming up on the newsstand, I have to grab them. Well, all the elements that you were talking about has to be an interesting photo. We have to put these headlines and teaser lines here to tell people what's inside the magazine, especially if it's already sitting on a rack with other magazines and it's being covered up. So one of the things we have to look out for is, okay, if I'm on the shelf with other magazines, well, okay, well, at least you can see the headline, you can see these teasers here. We call this a roof line. There's another thing being teased, and of course, you can see the RMC logo. And then you pick it up, and even before you open it, you can see here's some other articles that are listed here as well. So this is literally how we sell people on the newsstand. We have to get all these things on here. I wish we could do cleaner, um, less cluttered covers. And I do try to find a balance between a photograph that's exciting, um, but also one that will allow me to get in the other information we need to sell a magazine. So it's a delicate balance, but I think it's great that the coupler is able to pull back a little bit and just show beautiful images to draw people in, because then maybe an NER member will share that newsletter with another person who's not yet a member of the NMRA.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, one thing that I have been doing is I've been leaving copies of the NER coupler at just various places around where I frequent in Burlington, with the hopes that somebody will do what you're saying, like pick that up and like find themselves like browsing through an NER coupler magazine, and then all of the sudden, the goal is that you see them on the new membership page eventually.
That makes sense. It's kind of funny. Everybody's hitting on things that relate to questions that have been asked or that have been sent me. So people are getting answers without even asking the question. I think that's great. On my comments on the coupler and where we're going, you guys have mostly touched on all of it. We've turned it around to be simpler on the cover because we're not competing, and we're also trying not to look like Railroad Model Craftsman, Model Railroader, Model Railroad Planning. I think that could be a mistake to try and imitate a company, a corporate magazine that is being sold to the public. We're not selling to anybody. And John Durling had said to me when I took over, he says, keep it about people. I said, that's your tip to me, is to keep it about people. He goes, yeah, you don't have to load it with how-to articles and different things that compete with Model Railroader or Railroad Model Craftsman or blah, blah, blah. No, your first job is to share the news in the division or in the region and keep it about people. And I really like that. We're trying to keep it about people. Max, thanks for showing that spoiler alert magazine cover, because I don't think anybody has received it yet. You can flash it again. That cover and all the other ones, I think Max, Ben Elmore, and myself pulled out about 30, better than 30 model magazines. And then we pulled out another 20 Vogue, People, New Yorker, other magazines, spread them out on a table and said, what grabs us? Because we wanted to stop people in their tracks, so to speak. And we really did. We wanted people to say, whoa, 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 what is that? And that's kind of where we're going. We're going to keep it about people. We're going to make it visually stimulating. The software I'm using is a newer version of what we used to use, and Affinity Publisher. You know, it helps you do the 2-page big spread of a picture across 2 pages, and that's dynamic, and taking out some of the background and cradling a photograph in the words. I mean, creatively, that's really fun to do. It's difficult sometimes. You look at Jeff Hankey's article about the Western Maryland well car build that he did, and the words are shaped around the loads inside those. It augments his article, but it also is really fun to just look at. A lot of this is all about photography. And I've been asked about photography, and I'd like to see people submit stuff about photography. But the question that came to us was, what are you seeing or not seeing in the photographs that you're receiving as editors? And are there any tips? Let me see, tips, composition advice, that kind of thing. So whoever wants to pick it up first is welcome to. All right, Cynthia, you go first, because I told you that was going to be the order.
That's fine. I was going to let Otto, if he wanted to jump in. So what I am seeing more of is the use of these phones. And while the phone cameras are getting better, and you can use them for certain situations and certain subjects, they are not the desired format for us, because you really need depth of field. You can have a lot of drop off with the focus of a scene particularly, but even just like a 3/4 view of a locomotive, you might have just the front half or the front third in really good focus, and then it starts to get really soft as you go back. And another thing with photography in particular is that I'm seeing a lot of people not using enough light. And that is what your camera, no matter what kind of camera you have, that's what it absolutely has to have to capture a good image. And you want to use a camera that can take a very large format image, and some people call that RAW, or they call it large format JPEG, and things like that. And I won't get into the technical details. You can write any of our editors and they will give you those technical details. But you want to have a really big megabyte, photograph. And now that we have, bigger hard drives, we can take bigger photographs. And what's really important is having not just one light source, but multiple light sources, so you can get rid of shadows and stuff in your scenes. And what I found is, even if you're taking a photograph of, let's say, a review product, or you're showcasing how you're doing this particular model, and you're shooting it, it's a horizontal model, and you're shooting it straight on. If you don't have multiple sources of light, the color will shift actually across the model, which makes it a nightmare for us editors who do color correction to try to get even color across the entire model, which we know that the manufacturers did it that way if you didn't weather it. And so it creates a challenge, and especially if you did use 2 different light sources, but you use 2 different light intensities, like a yellowish tint and a whitish blue tint. And so that can further complicate those of us who do color correction, and we do color, I call it color perfection, because because sometimes I take color out of skies that it's not, I don't feel like it should be there. But we do a lot of like fixing of blemishes or obstacles that are on the backdrops of layouts that make it more realistic. So we put skies in behind the scenes of layouts to give more realism to the reader and draw them into the stories. We also do large scenes, which might cause you to need to have the program called Helicon Focus. We call that image stacking. A few years ago, we taught Dan Munson how to photograph layouts, and we did this because we wanted to have consistency with getting covers, which are the most difficult, I think, for my magazine to get, is because a lot of people shoot horizontally. They forget to turn their camera into the format that we prefer for a nice composition for a cover. We taught him about the lighting. We taught him about image stacking. We taught him about the use of first surface mirrors, so you can get into parts of the layout that you normally couldn't get into by shooting the camera.
Cynthia, could I jump in, because I think we just covered about 20 different topics.
I know, but he wanted photography.
Well, so I think, and Cynthia hit on several really important aspects here, and I think we can break it down, because I think we just threw a whole bunch of stuff at our audience here tonight. So I think let's talk about project photography. If you're doing a how-to and you're doing a step-by-step, I tell people, if you're building a project, even if it's at your workbench, you don't want to move it and you don't want to interrupt what you're doing while you're building, a cell phone can take an acceptable photo, but you still need a strong light source. I've done photos where I'm sitting at my workbench and I have the light over my shoulder and I've got the paintbrush in one hand and my camera in the other. It's totally doable, but your photo is not going to work unless you have a good, strong light source, because otherwise, in low light conditions, your cell phone is going to struggle trying to give you a sharp photo. It's going to go to a higher ISO setting and you're going to get a grainy, it looks like you have a sharp detailed picture. It's going to get really grainy. Strong light source will avoid that. So for project photography, your step-by-step cell phone is okay. Having a DSLR or other digital camera is better. And especially, like Cynthia said, when you're shooting the final product and you're trying to get that beauty shot, that 3/4 angle, you need lighting and you need depth of field to get a sharp picture. To get that depth of field, and this crosses over into photographing your model railroad. Yeah, you can drop your cell phone into a scene and get an interesting picture, but it's not going to have that depth of field. That depth of field comes from using a DSLR set up on a tripod and photographing the scene at different focal lengths, and then on your computer using photo stacking software to smush all those into one image, combining all the focal planes into one image. You can search on the internet. There are many guides to model railroad photography that will go in depth about lighting and focus stacking and all these things we talked about. You could do a whole clinic on just model railroad photography, but when you're pitching a story to us about your model railroad, it is absolutely fine to go down into your room and be like, hey, here's a couple of pictures of my layout so you can see what it's like. And then we can say, great, either we'll tell you how to photograph it, or maybe we'll hook you up with a local photographer who can photograph it for us. But like Cynthia said, cell phones aren't going to work for everything that we need. And especially lighting. We can't stress it enough. You may go down into your layout room, flip on the lights, and you're like, what? This is totally fine. Until you actually get some photographic spotlights down there, some floodlights or strobe lights, whatever it is, you don't realize how dark it actually is in your layout room. Even if you have all this LED spotlighting and everything else, until you actually set up your railroad for photography, you don't realize how dark it is.
I want to add one thing on for layout articles. If you want it drawn, the track plan drawn, you'll have to provide us with a rough, drawing of your track plan. But one thing that really helps our illustrators is if you do just, go around the room with your cell phone and just photograph, all the way around the room so they can get a real sense of how the track work flows and where the buildings are and everything. And then have that submitted along with your beauty shots.
I didn't know, Cynthia, that you guys did that. I thought you would have to kind of create that illustration and send it as part of the package.
We work with hand drawn, on graph paper on some people, and some people have the ability. They use a variety of programs, whatever they're comfortable with, to do some preliminary drawings, and then we work with them on.
We need something to start with. It can be a nice sketch. It could be a CAD drawing.
Yeah.
It could be, but we have to start with something. We're not going to be able to travel to your railroad to see your layout and do the scouting ourselves. So we need all the information you can send us to make a good track plan for an article.
That's great. Max does don't ask me. Max does a fair amount of professional photography. Did you want to comment on this?
Yeah, I do. I was going to mention that stacking photography and I think a lot of people don't realize how much work can go into creating a single image. Even just from the photographer's perspective, sometimes it's minutes or hours thinking about how you're going to put a scene together. And especially on a layout, depending on the size, you want to think about how you're positioning figures and how you're positioning vehicles and where you want everything to appear realistic, but also not appear like you manufactured the scene. You want it to look basically natural. One thing that I feel like we are have the luxury of with the coupler is that we can accept photographs from a variety of different devices, and it doesn't necessarily matter. Quality does matter, but for us, I feel like there's a little bit more leeway in what people can submit. It's entirely possible for somebody to send us a really nicely composed photograph with their cell phone, and it is possible for us to put that into the coupler. But still, you have to put the time and energy into that and put the intention into it to make it a really nice natural looking scene.
Thanks. I can tell you what I'm getting and what I'm not getting and what I'd like to see. Depth of field, for the people who don't know what depth of field is the depth of field of focus. It is the point where your camera lens focuses in on, let's say, the front end, the foreground of your locomotive, and then the background would be out of focus if your f-stop is wide open. The smaller the f-stop, the longer the depth of field of focus becomes. That's kind of a sketch, and definitely look it up if you need to. You will need to understand it better. A lot of the cell phone cameras now, or at least some of the newer ones, in portrait mode, you can actually change the f-stop. And if you look at a portrait one way with the background blurred, that can also be a great beauty shot, so to speak. One of the coupler covers, not that one, the one with the C14 or the Q27, Max is showing this locomotive. The locomotive was in focus. It was really tight. This is a great picture. The trestles in focus. When I received it, the background was also super in focus. That's a huge depth of field from the very front all the way to the backyard is in focus. I took that and dropped it in Photoshop to put the background out of focus so the front would pop. And I did that in part because with so much, everything in focus, I was starting to lose the locomotives going up the trestle. And I wanted the background to back up a little bit. So composition, that's a great composition because the photographer got down and under the locomotive. All too often, I'm getting pictures where it's as if you're, was it Gulliver and the Lilliputians? I mean, you're like a giant overlooking a layout, like, oh, my universe. But I want to get down low. I want to be at street level. I want to see the camera as if I'm walking down the sidewalk. I'd like to see more of that.
That's actually something I stress in Railroad Model Craftsman. I don't want helicopter shots, and we always try to portray model railroads. We don't want to see the edge of the fascia or anything like that. I mean, within reason, sometimes it's inescapable, but anytime that we can show off a model railroad and make it look as realistic as possible, that's the point. And I just want to mention something about photographing models outdoors. A couple years ago, we did a project, myself and George Riley, we did a series about modeling a commuter railroad, and we built a sectional railroad over the course of a year. My 2 sections I built here in New York, and when it was time to photograph them, I took them out to the local baseball field because I was able to have the models in the foreground and then the tree line far enough away that it's scaled in the photographs. And I tell you, nothing is better than photographing models in natural light outside. Mother Nature gives you all the photo floods you need. And here's my dirty secret. I photographed most of those pictures with my cell phone. And the way I was able to get away with it, because I was shooting on modules that were long and skinny, I was able to get a reasonable depth of field because the cell phone, it picks one plane of focus. You know, you can't adjust the focus. There's nothing here. But I was able to position the camera and the modules in a way where I got most of the scene in focus because of the way I had it. I was able to tilt it and move it. You go down to photograph someone's model railroad, you can't tilt and move the basement. But there are situations where you can get a reasonable amount of focus. And again, I don't need those trees and the backfield fence to be in focus. Like your trestle shot there, your trains are in the foreground and they're sharp. The structures are sharp. Those trees, those distant mountains, they can stay soft and out of focus.
That's great. That's great. I studied lighting and theater in college, and I'm in the middle of writing an article about how to use stage lighting in model railroading and treating each scene like a stage in a show. One of the professors or technical director over at St. Michael's College is giving me his stage to do some of the photo shoots with an actor and a dancer to illustrate the point of a dancer moving through a scene is the same as a locomotive moving through the scene. It's often lit lower so that you get a little bit more shadow. The shadow gives you more definition of the body. Now it sounds like I'm talking about a dancer, but it also applies to a locomotive rolling through a scene. You know, it's important to see everything, and it's important to not see everything, to give a little shadow, a little, wait, what is that? That's impressive. That's my 2 cents about. So lighting, yes, change angles, fill up the frame with light, and then start playing around. So that's my 2 cents. I have a question that was submitted about publications being HO-centric, that we are like we pander to the HO community And before I cut you all loose, I just want to say that if we get it, if we get an article or photographs or a photo essay and it's done by an N scaler or a G scaler or whatever, if it's a quality article, I can't wait to run it. And I think that's what's great with the coupler is we're local. You can shoot, you could call me up and say, hey, help me with this, and we will. But in my queue right now, I have a few HO articles. I have nothing from an N scaler, nothing from O scalers, nothing from large scale modelers. So to say we're HO centric, well, if you want to see it, you have to submit it. Anybody else?
Yeah, that's my take as well. I have we get accused of being an HO organization a lot, and that may be true that there's a lot of HO modelers, but we're not an HO organization. We represent all modelers, and I have absolutely no bias toward any scale for or against. And like you, if I get a non-HO scale article, it actually, pardon me.
That gave me a heart attack.
It actually gets fast tracked. So I actually, if you could say, I have a little bit of a preferential towards the non-HO scales articles, because I do want to promote them. And what I would offer as advice to anyone who does not model HO scale is first, appreciate the articles that are already appearing in the magazines, because a modeler took the time and the effort to put that together to share their ideas. And everyone needs encouragement. So we want to encourage those who have already done the work and that wanted to share and put their ideas out there. We need to encourage them to continue to write for a variety of the publications. Second of all, we can all learn something and appreciate something about the articles, whether it applies, directly to the technique that I would use for my N scale or O scale. You might be able to modify it, but you can still appreciate it. Then I had this idea that I would love to have regular columns of the non-HO scale variety, but we used to have like an every other month N scaler who wrote for us, but it's a huge commitment to write a column every single month for, editors will take you forever. We'll take advantage of you and, yeah, keep it coming. Because we're always starving for content, especially for the divisions and the regions. And what I thought of was that, we're a membership organization. We have clubs and we have divisions and we have regions. What ought to happen is a bunch of N scalers or S scalers or O scalers or whatever get together and decide, we can come up with a quarterly column and spread the love to where that something is being fed into the publications from your scale, but it's not the same person or the same group every single time that's having, that burden put on them. So you share the love. So you have a win-win where you get more coverage and you don't have, burnout on someone who would rather, spend, the majority of their time modeling and not writing a column every single month with those kind of burdens of a deadline. So if we can get that going, that would be awesome.
I think some of the problem that we have is a perception issue. Like Cynthia touched on, I think we know that there's probably a majority of HO modelers, and that's just the way the market has swung. It wasn't always that way. Just read up on your hobby history. You'll see it took a long time for HO to get to where it was. It took a long time for N scale to develop into what we know it today. And I think, when I was a kid growing up and I'd read the magazines, I'd read Model Railroader. It was, and this is, 30 years ago, I feel that the quality of the models, what was available in the marketplace, even when I was a kid, before I read what the headline was and I looked at the model and I'm like, I can tell that's an N scale because it's got chunky couplers and, I can tell that's O scale because, so there were tells. Like even for as hard as people worked on their models then, you could kind of figure out that like, up, that's this, that's N scale, that's HO, that's O. I feel that the quality of models, the quality of modeling, even the stuff that's coming out of the box and off the shelf, um, it surpasses anything that we had 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Oh,
That said, I think that we're publishing material in Railroad Model Craftsman. People can't tell what they're looking at. And whenever I get something that's not HO scale, I make sure to put it in the title of the article. So it shows up in search, shows up in the table of contents. We had someone scratch build a beautiful interlocking tower from Buffalo in S scale. Um, and I'm like, holy cow, this is amazing. And it's beautiful. And it's not American Flyer, it's S scale. And if I didn't label as S scale, I dare you to tell me what that model was built in. Same thing, we've got this beautiful layout that we feature often. Tyler Whitcomb's Tonino Western. It's an N scale layout. It's a modern railroad. It's based on the lumber short lines of Washington State. If I didn't tell you every month that it was N scale, I don't think you could tell me. If I didn't label as N, I don't think you would know which scale it was. We get some beautiful Proto 48 stuff that looks that again and again. I think people are just so quick to absorb what they're looking at. They look at the photos first, they read later, and I think there's just this perception that all we're publishing is HO scale, and it's not true. I did have someone come up to me at a train show recently. He was very upset that I'm not featuring any Z scale. And again, I told him right off the bat, we publish what we're submitted. And quite frankly, and I'm in a lot of modeling groups on Facebook. I try to get out and especially other interests that aren't my primary interest. I try to meet these people so I can get content from the magazine and learn what people are working on. I have not come across any people who are modeling Z. So again, all you Z scalers out there, you want to see some Z in the magazine, send us your best stuff and let's get it published. And that goes for anything: narrow gauge, traction, um, ON30, SN3, HON3, whatever niche thing you think you're into that we're not covering. Send it to me, send it to Cynthia. Let's get it published.
I know what that was. Okay. I am going to say that, Max, I wanted to talk to you about this, but and Otto, I believe, and Cynthia, you may already have guidelines for the general public to know how to submit to the magazines.
If you go on the Railroad Model Craftsman website, which is rrmodelcraftsman.com,
Yep.
you'll find our submission guidelines, or click the contact us button and send me an email and I will send you a link.
That sounds great. I want to create the same thing for the coupler so that people feel more invited to do so, to submit things. We're running out of time. I want to ask real quick about the viability of print publications in a digital world. And I am going to steal it for 10 seconds to say, because I feel it's my own question. I'm passionate about it. We have seen a pandemic happen where if it weren't for the digital world, a lot of us would not have gotten together. A lot of us would have been alone and suffering, so to speak, at least in this model industry. And now that it's opening up, people are hungry to get together. I think print magazine is very much like that hungry face-to-face. I carry it in my pocket. I want to open up and see this picture. I want to read the article and carry it with me. It's not that digital world, computers and phones are going to ever go away, but they all have their place. And I think print is vitally important to our world.
I mean, I'll just talk about this from a commercial standpoint because that's what I'm involved in right now. Our subscription rates continue to climb. People are interested in receiving magazines. There are more, not just railroad magazines, there are more print publications now than there ever were before, simply because it's so easy to make one. With computers and digital prepress, it is easier than ever to produce a magazine. That said, digital also has its place, but as an augment. Our primary product is the print magazines. We're a print publisher. Our websites have content that augment what we do. Our Facebook page is a way to connect with readers in a way that they haven't been able to do that before. We do virtual conferences like these to reach out to people. Again, and none of these are replacements for anything that we do in print. And honestly, the only time that we see numbers go down is, quite frankly, when portions of our readership age out, attrition. And it's really our job to figure out ways to bring in the next generation and to get younger people interested. And quite frankly, doing virtual get togethers like these is one way to do that. And for people who think that the hobby is dying, stop. For people who say that, you're the reason the hobby's dying. I'm saying that right now. The hobby's not dying, it's growing. It's growing in ways that you can't see, and maybe that's why you think it's dying. The hobby is growing. There's more niche publications, more niche interests. It's not going anywhere.
Well, thank you all. I wish we had more time. You had a really good discussion going on here, but we're getting kind of tight for time right now. So hang on just a minute. Couple of quick questions, if we can keep them really quick. Cynthia, do you have help with artwork, or do you do it all yourself?
With what work?
Your artwork.
My artwork? I have help with my illustrations, yes.
Yeah. Another question was, do you find that your magazines attempt to follow any sort of historic precedent, like taking design cues from older magazine graphic design?
I would say absolutely. You know, we talked a little bit about that earlier, where me, Chris, and Ben Elmore sat down and looked at a variety of different magazines from you know, wildly ranging topics, and picked out the ones that were most visually stunning. So yeah, I would say that there is a bit of relation there in terms of aesthetics.
Someone else asked, do any of you look at magazines from other parts of the world, like the UK?
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely, I do.
Yeah, I've noticed some of the UK stuff is got some pretty good stuff in it. So.
When we were working on the coupler, I had heard that some of the UK magazines were great, so I pulled up a bunch of them, and I'm trying pretty hard to beat them.
All right, let's see what else we got here. One other question. Do you find, no, that's one we already had. That's not what I'm looking for. All right, Cynthia, when looking at layouts in the magazine, someone was asking, he kind of wishes that you could take the cue from Model Railroad or include camera positions of the photos in the articles. Is there a way you can do that, or is that something that you could consider?
I could talk to my author about that, because he would have to kind of indicate those positions, but we can work on that.
Yeah, I know when I look at photos in the magazine, sometimes it's nice to be able to kind of key in on the portion of the layout.
Yeah, to make a little
give you an idea of.
Same problem we have, and people ask me for it too, and I'm like, if the author doesn't indicate, we have no way of knowing. We could guess, but it helps when the author includes that information.
Yeah.
And it helps when the author gives you decent captions. You can get all these pictures, but if you don't have captions, sometimes it's a hole. It creates a hole, and you really need not too much detail, but you need something to help give it a place or perspective.
All right. Well, I think that just about does it. So I think we're now ready to move on. And I thank you all for your participation tonight. It was very informative, and I'm sure everybody out there enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Go out there and build some models.
Roger on that. All right. All right, Speed.
final installment of the 2022 edition of the NERx Model Showcase. Each night, we will look at some of the models submitted for the showcase, and over the course of all 4 nights, you will have the opportunity to see them all. Let's enjoy part 4. Roger Post, a new NMRA member from the Garden State Division, kit bashed an HO scale Walthers bay window caboose kit into a snow flanger. In this photo, you can see the flanger blades Roger cut, bent, and shaped from a Coca-Cola can. Roger made modifications to the caboose body to accommodate the changes to the car floor. He also modified the window openings and added other details to the car. With the modifications completed, Roger finished the model by painting and decaling it for the Canadian National and is now ready for service. Two nights ago, we highlighted Ed O'Rourke's trucks on a flat car. Tonight, Ed shares his HO scale 10,000-gallon Tichy tank car masquerading as a New Haven 8,000-gallon K29 tank car. Behind the car is a scratch-built brick water tank. Yesterday, you saw Chuck Diljack's Old Timers Bar Hydrocal model. Today, we share Chuck's HO scale Finaro and Camerlengo horizontal ribbed hopper resin kit. This kit is a one-piece body and was used for a clinic at the 2018 Northeastern Regions Convention. Chuck bent his own grab irons and cut levers for the model. He used a brake wheel from Tichy, stirrup steps from A-Line, and added L-girders and rivets to the slope sheet brace on the interior to create a stronger bond with the car. Chuck also scratch-built the brake levers, rods, and brake lines seen on the underside of the car. This scene was created by Ron Hoas and Garden State Division member Andy Rubo for Andy's HO scale Pennsylvania Railroad New York Division layout. Ron scratch-built the tower as well as cut the cardstock material for the substation trusses on a Cameo silhouette machine. Russ Norris, a master model railroader from the Hub Division, shared recent scenery work on his HON3 East Broad Top layout. He constructed a spur that curves around a mountain and passes through 3 different scenes. The first scene is a 1920s logging site. The middle scene is an ore tipple for a high-grade silica ore known as Ganister rock. The ore was used in steel furnaces and other high-temperature applications. The track continues to rise and curve around the mountain until they end at the East Broad Top coal dock at the Rock Hill Shops, a scene that would have been typical from the early 20th century through today. That ends the NERx Model Showcase for the 2022 NERx Virtual Convention. The NERx team thanks everyone that shared their work.
All right, folks. Well, we're off to a good start on the evening. The next item on the agenda is a layout tour of the Ramapo Central Railroad of Fred Dellaiacono. Speed, okay to roll the tape.
Welcome to the 2021 layout tour of the Ramapo Central Railroad. Today's tour will be starting at the West End, Albany, and terminating at the East End, Shoehorn Pier on Train 1. The layout started building 16 years ago and evolving into a walk-in design. The layout is automated for continuous running via a reverse loop to reverse loop, or it can be operated as a point-to-point. It is a freelance branch line set in the 1940s, operating short freights and local passenger trains pulled by sound-equipped steam engines. The layout is fully scenic, except for some track balancing and other details as I see fit. The layout has 18 customers, including interchange yards and an operating car float. This is the West End staging yard that can hold 6 to 7 trains. It also doubles as a working freight yard, if I so desire. The far right-hand track ends as the lead for the engine storage area. This shows the West End engine and caboose storage area. Having no room for an engine terminal or roundhouse, the shelf under the table is the roundhouse. The shelf holds 12 cassettes, each 12 inches long. It is easier and safer to run the engines onto the cassettes than to place them in boxes when not in use. My Armstrong turntable is a simple cassette that protects the equipment. A train arriving engine first, I uncouple the engine from the train and I run it onto the cassette. I then lift the cassette and engine off the layout, turn it around for another run, or place it in storage in the under-the-table roundhouse. Here we show the cassette aligned with the track lead. I installed an Atlas Rerail track on the lead to aid in the junction transition. Electrical contact between the lead tracks and the cassette is made by soldering point 032 diameter phosphor bronze wires to the outside of the yard lead rails. These wipers contact the outside of the cassette track, thus powering the cassette. They also help align the tracks. I found this to be a simple and effective way to power the cassettes. This is a slide of the yard lead. The stairway into the train room is but 36 inches from the wall. I wanted to keep this floor space, so I used a piece of 1x2 pine for the sub-road bed and attached it to the wall with small brackets. I secured the road bed about a half inch off the wall, thus allowing clearance for the trains. I glued Atlas truss bridge sections to the edge of the sub-road bed for protection. This slide is of the Y bridge, which is also the end of the yard limits. The left leg goes to Chrisville, the right leg goes through 2 tunnels and bypasses the town. These 2 legs eventually reconnect at the opposite end of Chrisville, thus forming the western reverse loop. This is another probably more dramatic view of Y Bridge. It is the first scenic element visitors see when entering the train room. This view of the Y Bridge includes Chrisville Junction and Station. The diamond, which is only powered through the main line, makes for a most interesting scene. This is an overall view of Chrisville and the valley it occupies. The track coming off the diamond is the Chrisville interchange, a major source of traffic. This is Chrisville Junction, showing the interchange track on the left, a storage track in the middle, and the teen track on the right. A long passing siding and main line are in the light-colored ballast. This is Chrisville. A wide variety of kits were used, including bar mills, Art Deco, DPM, and others, to create Chrisville. It took several months of playing with the building sites before finalizing the scene. More than 20 years ago, I built a Craftsman kit, Scotia Supply, made by Sierra West. In addition to making an outstanding model, the most unique thing about the kit was the instruction book. It gave a great tutorial on painting and weathering with chalks. One of my favorite buildings on the layout is the Sandy and Pine Cabinet Makers. This is a non-rail served industry. It is scratch built, including the roof shingles, cyclone, and has a detailed loading dock interior. I damaged the last light fixture I had that was to go over the rear door of the Sandy and Pine building. This was just prior to evaluation for Merit Award. So I decided to improvise with a couple of workers installing one. The broken fixture pieces are in a box, and I installed some wires coming out of the building with the workers shown trying to install a new one. It made for a great scene. Varies Coal, a retail coal dealer, was a scratch-built structure including the office and the truck scale. There was originally a coal mine in this area, and I felt it to be overpowering in relationship to everything else that was around it, so I removed it and replaced it with a road leading to a truck dump. It opened up the scene and still gave me a great destination for hoppers. East of Twin Bridges, we cross a deep gorge by way of a Central Valley Pratt truss bridge. This bridge had to be shortened about 3 inches to fit the span. An interesting thing about this scene is that the bridge sits only about 4 inches from the wall. Continuing our journey eastward, we arrive at Danton. There are no switching opportunities at Danton. It's just a sleepy little town with a small station nestled in the far corner of the layout. This is a close-up of the Danton station area. I don't recall who made the kit for the station, as it is at least 25 years old. I thought I would have a little fun and scratch build this little cafe to fit the available space. The interior is fully detailed and lit with LEDs. This is another view of Danton showing the road leading into the town. The structures are from many different manufacturers. I added awnings and other details to give them some character and to disguise the origins of the kits. Continuing east, we arrive at Drew City, a major source of rail traffic revenue. Drew has 6 customers, a large team track business, and 2 passenger stations. This scene was recently rebuilt by replacing several large structures with smaller retail buildings. Some of the streets were rearranged and populated with people and vehicles to complement the new look. This changed the overall appearance of Drew to better reflect the branch line operation of the railroad. Rosedale Station is a scratch-built structure that sits on the western edge of Drew City. The inspiration for the structure was from a photo of Erie Station. The gutter on the rear of the station kept pulling off, so I decided that I would capitalize on it and make it a point of interest. This is a view looking down busy Railroad Avenue. Valley Foods was made from a Walters meatpacking kit with the office addition from an old Walters freight house. The loading docks were cobbled together from the scrap box. Seal and Steel Plumbing Supply was created by combining a DPM and a Design Associate kit. The loading dock was scratch built. Times Street has an interesting building, the Gazette. The inspiration for this building came from photos from the old New York Times building in New York City. This building is a good example of what can be built from mat board, as this entire structure was built from this material. The fixtures on the side of the loading dock entrances are costume jewelry from Michaels. Every city has to have a poor man's alley. Drew is no exception. This is a view of Station Avenue. It is one of the main streets in the city of Drew. Slab Street is the entrance to Slab Yard. It is on the eastern end of Drew and connects the north and south ends of the city. Slab Yard is a fun area to switch. Each of the two tracks can hold 6 cars, plus there is a gantry crane track at the end of the yard. This area was previously the location of Weaver Mills, an industry comprised of 3 large structures. It overpowered the entire city and did not offer many switching opportunities. There are times when a simple scene works much better. Coming off the Slab Yard lead is a spur track that services the Always Fresh Produce Company and the Drew Freight House. Shown here is Always Fresh, which is a company that facilitates the transfer of fruits and vegetables to trucks. At the end of this spur is a small kit-bashed Drew Freight House. With these 2 busy customers sharing the same spur, servicing these accounts can be quite challenging and time-consuming. At the far east end of Drew is a spur track that serves 2 industries. This slide is of one of the industries, Hot's Coal, which was kit-bashed from an American modeler's grain elevator kit. The other industry served on Drew's East End spur track is the Bottoms Up Chair Company. This was made from a Campbell's kit. An old Atlas lumberyard completes the scene. Continuing east, we pass Valley Station, which serves Lower Chrisville and Fisher's Pier. As we enter the Moutstown area, we first pass Fisher's Pier. Here we have Fishbone Fertilizer, Fisher's Fish, and a marine supply company. All of these structures were kit-bashed from an assortment of kit manufacturers. This is one of my favorite scenes on the railroad, Marine Supply. It was made by combining 2 building kits from Laser Kits, Paul's Repair, and the Logging House Bunker Car. The pier was scratch-built. This is an overall view of the Moutstown waterfront area. It is about 8 feet long. All of the piers and the water bulkheads are scratch-built. The water is made from toilet paper, as I had described in one of my old clinics. At the east end of the waterfront is a ferry scene. Here is car ferry SS Dell sliding into the ferry pier dock with a load of vintage cars heading for a local car show. The boat was built from a kit by Seaport Model Works. This is a view of the dock and ferry pier station. Both the station and the dock were scratch built. This is a close-up of the ferry ramp. Inspiration for this came from photos of the New Haven operations on Cape Cod. Continuing east on a journey through Mattstown, we come to Jack Hammer Lumber. This scene consists of structures from several different manufacturers. This is another view of Jack Hammer Lumber showing the receiving track, the famous Atlas Lumberyard structure, and a lot of other eye candy that an industry like this can create. This is Pop Soda, a scratch-built structure with a detailed interior loading dock. The most difficult part of this structure was the building of that water tank on the roof. It was done by gluing individual boards to a foam core. Sharing the same spur with Pop Soda is Dellaiacono. I'm sure that I'm not the only one who, over the years, has accumulated building kits that we thought could be used as rail-served industries, but in reality, they were a little too small for that purpose. Dellaiacono consists of 6 such buildings from 5 different manufacturers. When combined, they formed an impressive manufacturing company that appeared to have grown over the years. Some of the kits were modified to fit the scene. All the buildings were painted the same color, off-white, to give unity to the look. All it took was a little imagination. This is just another view of Dellaiacono. Notice that the details really bring the scene to life. Tying down the end of Mattstown is a small engine service facility and a team track. The single-stall engine house shown was scratch-built. The eastern end of the run is Shoehorn Pier. The area consists of a 3-track yard and a working car float for transferring cars on and off the railroad. I do have a second car float for this purpose. The layout was never really designed to have this pier on it, but I've always wanted one, and I figuratively had to shoehorn the design onto the railroad to make it work. It is one of the fun operating areas of the railroad, and I'm sure glad I did it. This is an overall view of Shoehorn Pier. I have assigned a small 260 steamer as the designated switch engine for the pier. The main line continues around Shoehorn Pier and into a reverse loop for the train to continue as a westbound or for continuous running. A tail track comes off the lead of the Shoehorn Pier yard track. This track is used as a switcher pocket or a lead for an under-the-table roundhouse and storage area. This becomes the east end of the run when we operate as a point-to-point railroad. A similar contact and cassette alignment design was used to connect the storage cassettes as was used on the west end of the layout for the under-table roundhouse. The cassettes at this end of the layout are 24 inches long. The distance from the end of the tail track support to the end of the fascia, where the cassette would normally be held, is too short to support this long cassette. Because the fascia is on the main entrance into the layout, the cassette support had to be retractable so as not to block this main aisle. The cassette supports are made from 2 wood dowel rods attached to a flat piece of plywood. The dowels are supported by the 1x4 layout frame. They extend about 12 inches into the aisle and, when not in use, are pushed back against the fascia. This is the east end under the table roundhouse and storage area. The shelves hold 18 24-inch long cassettes and also the car float barge for shoehorn pure. This shows how the cassette is supported. Notice that the cassette clears the river seam below it so that nothing is disturbed. The engagement of the cassette to the lead track is the same as that used on the west end of the railroad, using the spring contact soldered to the lead tracks. As I stated before, I find that the use of cassettes to move rolling stock and engines on and off a layout to be an effective and safe way of handling your equipment. Swing plates or removable pins on the end of each of the cassettes prevent an accidental roll-off of the equipment. Well, that concludes our tour of the Ramapo Central Railroad version 2021. Thanks for watching.
Well, that was a nice layout that we just saw, and now we're ready to move on to the end of the program. But before we do that, we have Bernard from Mini Prints with us to announce the winner of the Mini Prints drawing. Bernard, it's all yours.
Hey, Peter. Thanks so much. What a wonderful conference. Thanks so much to NERx for letting me be a part of this. And I'm very excited to announce the winner of the $50 US Mini Prints gift card, which is redeemable at miniprints.com. And our winner is Stephen Wagner. So congratulations, Stephen. I will be in touch with you. I have your email address here. And yeah, that's congrats and all the best. I will be in touch. And thanks to everyone at NERx for this wonderful presentation. Cheers.
And thank you, Bernard, and thanks to Mini Prints for sponsoring us. We really
Absolutely.
appreciate it. Thanks again.
And looking forward to the next clinic very much.
Yep. Yeah, so am I, because there's some stuff in John's clinic that has really piqued my interest. So
3D printing is going to change our hobby.
yeah, and LiDAR scanning. So let's move on. And now for our final clinic, we have John Silhavey, and he's going to give us a look at a fascinating new aspect of the hobby, 3D printing, painting, and LiDAR update. John started model railroading and rail fanning in 1992. He has been custom painting and adding lighting effects to locomotives since 2010. His areas of interest are railroads in the early to mid 1990s. His favorites include Conrail, Amtrak, commuter railroads, CN, CP, and the pre-private railways in Mexico. He is currently building a 20 by 6 foot model of a post-Conrail shot line known as the Mitchellville branch. In addition to model railroading, John is a member of the Shoreline Trolley Museum, Long Island HO Track, and the Reading Railroad Historical and Technical Society. He resides in New York with his wife Lee and his crazy puppy Trudy. John, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Pete, and welcome everyone to the clinic on LiDAR scanning, 3D printing, and the paint update. Just a little bit of an update to my bio. I now have Crazy Kitty Anders to keep Crazy Puppy Trudy company, so a little bit of addition to the family there. So when we last spoke in Westford, I was beginning to explain the LiDAR scanning and 3D printing process. So there's been a number of updates since that clinic. And for those of you that weren't able to attend, I'll give a little bit of a background here. So what is LiDAR? LiDAR is essentially light detection and ranging. It is similar to radar. And a LiDAR device sends and receives a signal measuring distance and photographing at the same time. Now, this is what you can't do. At this moment, right now, you can't scan a real world object and export it to your 3D printer in scale. Not yet, but this technology is in its infancy. So I'm sure we'll be seeing some more availability for the consumer very soon. Large manufacturers such as Rapido have been laser scanning museum locomotives and cars, but there still is going to be a need for modeling software to make a finished product. So even Rapido, they need to get into their software and do some work. And if you're just the average model railroader, you're starting in LiDAR, you have to do the same. But regardless, if you're a big company or a hobbyist, you need to convert your scan model to a hollow object with walls. And we'll go into that a little later on. What you can do, you can scan railroad equipment and other structures to take accurate measurements. You can scan complex geometry for tracing in a 3D modeling program. And you can create a one-stop reference with your model rather than having to refer to multiple photographs or hoping that the diagram you drew with the measurements doesn't go through the wash or get caught in the rain and have it destroyed. You can keep going back to your phone multiple times to check your measurements. So to get started with LiDAR scanning and printing, this is what you need. The iPhone 12 Pro and 13 Pro, the iPad Pro 2021 or later models, either phone or iPad has the LiDAR app, the Scaniverse app, which is $17 a year. I prefer the SketchUp modeling software. It's free to $300 per year, depending on which one you choose. The Q Loan app is a great app. It's a $20 one-time fee, and this is great for scanning small objects and, of course, a 3D printer. So your software needs to be able to import and export STL or stereolithography files. SketchUp is highly recommended, but there are other options except Blender. Blender is very difficult to use. It's not that great for 3D modeling. It's more for game development. And it's best if your software can build from lines and not shapes. You're always going to work in millimeters. There are websites that convert scales into millimeters. So if you have an object, let's say, is you measured it out to be 90 millimeters and you need to find out what that is in HO scale, you can type that in. It'll give you the approximate millimeters for that. A 60-foot subway car in HO scale is 210 millimeters. So getting started, we're looking at a photograph of a Boston Blue Line car at the Seashore Trolley Museum in Maine. And they were nice enough to let me go up there and scan a number of transit cars and get measurements, which I was able to convert into one car already, and then I have a few others rather in the works right now. So these were the scans of the Blue Line car. You can see the 3D image of the front, and then you can also see the side image. So not only is there some solid material there that you can work with, but you have accurate measurements that you can convert to scale. And you can see the measuring. If you look at there what the exact distances are, and then once again with those distances in your LiDAR scan, you can always refer to those, and you can convert real world measurements to scale in millimeters. And this is building with lines. So this is the nose piece of the car. And each of these lines that you see here is taken from the measurements in the LiDAR. So basically what you're going to be doing is you're going to be building up a shape with the lines rather than just trying to clean up the model from the scan. It just won't work. truck in there, and then you have the motor. I used a Digitrax decoder, and then the pickup truck. So basically, I have all wheels picking up power. And if you want to add sound, you can add a sound decoder and a speaker to it as well. Okay. These were custom 3D printed bolsters that I made to fit the Bowser mechanism. Depending on if you use like Northwest Shortline or another manufacturer, you may have to come up with your own bolsters to fit it. In this case, the power truck has the gear and then the pickup truck doesn't. So one truck is higher than the other. So you can see there's a difference in the thickness of the two. And basically what I did was I set it in a way that I can use 256 screws and had the 3D printer print the holes in it right away. So all I needed to do was drill and tap, put the 256 screws in, and it worked fine. You can see this one here fits specifically the Bowser truck. So you just put the little bolster in there and it works just fine. Here's the running model. I'm just going to go ahead and play the video just to prove that this car actually does run. And I also tested the pulling power. And I'll get back to that in a minute. Just let me play the video here. Okay, so you're probably wondering, why is a subway car pulling 3 freight cars? Well, this was a test to make sure that the powered train could pull the the trailers, because eventually I'll be making the trailers to make a 4-car train, and that would be the approximate weight of one powered subway car with 3 unpowered trailers on it. So that's why you see it pulling the 3 cars. But once again, just prove to you that it does run, and yes, you can power your 3D printed equipment. Okay, some other information. An editable and printable Market Frankfurt car is available on thingiverse.com. And some local libraries have 3D printers. So if you wanted to go ahead and print that Market Frankfurt car, you can download it from Thingiverse and bring it to your local library. I know around Long Island, it's about $1 an hour, give or take. So for probably about $10, you can have your own Market Frankfurt car. You definitely need to prime with the Steiner's primer. It's a polymer-based primer made by Badger Airbrush, and regular paint will not stick to the model without it. You really need that thick primer to paint the 3D printed material. I use the Vallejo Air Acrylic paint, the Air Acrylic and the Steiner's. Once again, it's a great combination. The finish was rock solid. It was almost like a candy coated shell finish. That's how great it was. I powered with the Bowser trolley mechanism, but once again, if you want to use something like Northwest Shortline, you may have to modify the bolsters. And these files are Creative Commons, so you can make as many you want for your personal use, but you just can't sell them. Okay, now I'm going to go into a paint update. And in some of my previous presentations, I was trying different products. What I call the paint crisis being the end of Polyscale and Flowquill. So I basically needed to test some new products since I do a lot of custom painting, and I do have some updates. So once again, my favorite is still Vallejo Air Acrylic. It's a very durable finish, comes in a wide variety of colors. It's sometimes difficult to find. I know Hobby Lobby carries it, so there's a lot of colors, but sometimes it depends on what's in stock. You want to prime it with the Steiner's primer, and it's the best for 3D printed objects. It does require thinning to about 50%, and you can brush fix errors easily, and you're going to mask it with the 3M striping tape available at most auto parts stores. Tamiya acrylic, another favorite. The finish is not as durable, but it's easy to fix errors. Has a decent variety of colors and is very easy to find. A lot of hobby stores that even don't sell trains will sell it because it's used in model cars and airplanes. You want to prime it with the Tamiya primer. Don't use the Tester's gray primer. It will change the paint color. The Tamiya requires minimal thinning. Brushing fixes errors easily. And once again, mask it with the 3M striping tape. This is something new. I did a test on True Color paint. I had seen it at a number of shows and I decided to give it a try because they have an excellent variety of railroad colors. Their finish is very durable. It is getting easier to find. It's often found at train shows. More and more hobby stores rather are carrying it. You can prime it with their True Color primer. That's the only one you can use. No thinning required. And you just pour it right into the paint cup or bottle and it goes. And brushing fixes errors easily. And you want to mask it with the True Color masking sheets available from the manufacturer. A few things to remember. The instructions are very important when using True Color, more so than other brands. First thing, you want to wash your model before painting with warm water and regular dish soap. Don't use Dawn because Dawn could be used as a paint remover. You want to blot dry and handle with a paper towel or other towel. You don't want to get any fingerprints or oils on the model. And you're going to paint at 28 psi, which is actually lower than normal. Most painting with the higher materials, you're doing like about 35 to 40, but this is 28 and it's low from the manufacturer's recommendations. But the one thing to remember, because you are at a lower PSI, the airbrush will take longer to atomize the paint. So basically you take a piece of paper, a junk shell, something that you don't care if it gets painted on, crack the valve of your airbrush and let the pressure build up. And eventually you'll see it. Once, maybe after about 30 seconds or so, you'll be up to the pressure. And even though, because you have that low PSI, you need to build up the color by layering the paint. So your first layer, if you're painting orange, is probably going to be like a darkish color, but the more orange you put, it'll come up to a brighter color. And you want to paint in a well-lit, ventilated area. Ventilated area, of course, is so you don't get sick. But the well-lit is important because you need to see that the color is layering up, because with your first shot of paint, it's not going to look as bright as normal. So you want to build up that layer until you get it to the point that you want. And you're going to clean up by soaking your airbrush components in acetone in a glass container. Don't use a plastic cup. It will eat right through it. And now I have a red stain on my bathroom vanity because of that. If you need to mask, you want to rewash your model again. Once again, warm water with regular dish soap. Don't use Dawn. You'll just basically undo what you just did. And if you need straight shapes with the masking material, you want to use a cutter like a Cricut or Silhouette or Brother. Any of those cutters will cut straight lines, and you can cut the masking into strips. So this is the result. So I used the gray primer from True Color, and then I used gray paint for the lower half of the boxcar, and then I just used New Haven orange for the upper. And I just hand cut a stripe and put it on there just to test it to make sure it didn't peel the paint off. And the result was excellent. I found this to be a very durable product, very easy to use as long as you follow the directions. But I did have a few wish lists for the manufacturer of True Color paint. First of all, the instructions need to be more visible and on the website, and maybe a video. I had to kind of search through the website to find the different components of the directions, what the PSI was, what the masking was, about washing the model. So it'd be good if they just put forward a straightforward direction sheet. And the masking is sold in 8.5 by 11 sheets. But for model trains, we tend to work in strips or stripes. So if they made this in a strip or a roll, something similar to what 3M does, that would be a big help. So I have some special thanks for this evening's presentation, Shoreline Trolley Museum in East Haven, Connecticut. I started doing some LiDAR scanning there. The Seashore Trolley Museum in Kennebunkport, Maine was an excellent help, especially all the Boston Transit equipment I was able to scan. Did a little more scanning at the Danbury Railway Museum in Danbury, Connecticut. Dremel 3D printers, as always, as far as I'm concerned, they're still the best 3D printer you can buy. And as far as I know, the only one you can just open the box and, plug it in and it goes. And of course, my wife, Lisa Silhavey. Any questions? Sure. Okay. Okay. So right here. Okay. Okay. So just going back to measuring. So if you can see the dimensions on the model itself, where the headlight to the door is 18.25 inches. And then from the headlight to the window is 12 inches. These are the kind of measurements you can get from the LiDAR. And then you can convert the real world measurements to scale in millimeters. And when you have your measurements, you want to begin to build with lines. You don't want to work with shapes, because each of those lines you can see in the image, that was taken from the LiDAR. So those are exact dimensions converted to millimeters that you want to build. And once you build with the lines, you can extrude the flat image into a solid. And here you can see the extruded 2D image into 3D. And you can see how the marker lights are there, the headlights, the door, and the cab windows are there. This is now a solid. And this is the actual 3D printed nose piece here. So once I begin to work on the rest of the car, I can add that together and then build the 3D model of the Boston Blue Line car. So we're not ready for STL import, but soon. If you look at this image of this subway car here, you can see it would take quite a long time to clean that model up, but you can trace components from it, take measurements. So once again, it's an excellent start to the technology, and I think we'll be seeing more in the future. Case study for tonight is the Philadelphia Market Frankfurt subway car in HO scale. This car is in the Seashore Trolley Museum in Kennebunkport, Maine. And if you remember from the Rocky movies, a lot of times when Rocky was standing outside his gym, you would see the cars going overhead on the viaduct. This is how I built the body and the roof in SketchUp from the dimensions off the LiDAR. You can see basically I'm building a hollow box. And I'm building from the ground up, because when you 3D print, you have gravity working against you. So that's why the roof is a separate piece. So I built the walls. If I did not take the roof off separately, what would happen with the printer would automatically add supports to support the roof on the inside. And then I would have to go in there and cut all those supports out in order to put the motor and other accessories inside there. This is the 3D printed shell. And this is a very durable material that is 3D printed out of. And it's PLA, polylactic acid. And I think it's more durable than resin. You get some wisps in there, but with any model, you'll have to do a little bit of filing and sanding. But then once that's done, you can go ahead and paint. This is the painted model with the decals. And had no problems masking and painting the colors. I did add the steel ribs to the car, but for the most part, it was a relatively easy paint job. And yes, the car does run. You can see the mechanism underneath it, which we'll go into more in a second. This is the mechanism and the decoder. So with 3D printing, it's very light, so I had to add a weight. And this is especially true with trolley mechanisms, because the wheels are smaller than regular railroad wheels. So to keep the car on the track, I added a weight at each end. You can see here the power truck sitting on the bolster. Now you got the motor. And then a decoder. I used a regular Digitrax decoder. And then a second pickup truck. Now these are custom bolsters that I had to make to fit the Bowser trucks. And these can be fastened with 256 screws. So the 3D printer automatically prints the holes. So all you need to do with the screws are drill and tap. And you can see the difference in thickness. And the difference in thickness is because the powered truck has the gear tower. So that's going to be smaller. And then the pickup truck would be thicker. And you can see the pedestal bolt there. So if you don't separate the thickness, you'll end up having the car higher on one end than the other. If you use another powered truck assembly like Northwest Shortline, you may need to make different bolsters than the ones that I used here. So here's the running model. So here's the running model. Now you're probably wondering why a subway car is pulling 3 freight cars, and the answer is simple. I needed to test whether one powered subway could pull 3 trailers, which I'll be making this year. And so I think about like a 1 to 3. So one powered will pull 3, and the freight cars are about the weight of the trailer. So that seemed to be an accurate test of how powerful the motors are. Okay, some other information. The editable and printable Market Frankfurt car is available on thingiverse.com. 3D printers are available at your local library, and the one near me, I believe the printing rate is about $1 an hour. So for about $10, you can have your own Market Frankfurt car. You want to prime with the Steinerres primer before painting. This is a polymer-based primer, and it sticks very well to the PLA material. You want to paint it with the Vallejo Air acrylic paint. I powered the train with the Bowser trolley mechanism, but you can power with Northwest Shortline, or if you're doing a locomotive, you can use whatever equipment you wish. And for the Market Frankfurt, these files are Creative Commons, so you can make how many of them you want for your personal use. You just can't sell them. Okay, we'll go to questions now.
All right. What does the LiDAR equipment look like, John? Can you give us an idea of what we're dealing with for size or for, just
Okay, I'm going to
exactly
switch
what it
back
looks
to
like?
my camera and I'll show you. Okay, can you see me?
Yep.
Okay, it's just the iPhone 12.
Really?
Yeah, it's one of the sensors on the bottom of the phone.
So there's no special equipment or anything to
No,
do a LiDAR
there is an
scan?
iPad that has it as well, so either or.
All right. How do you get it up? Like if you needed to do the top, I mean, I wasn't sure when we started this what you were using for equipment. So I guess the iPhone doesn't fly unless you attach it to a helicopter or something.
Well,
So
depending on where you go, some museums, if you're a member, you borrow a ladder. That's probably the easiest way to do
Yeah.
it. A lot of things, I mean, you may have to use your own. If you can get a base, I mean, sometimes if you stand far back enough, you can get a good picture of the roof. I know when we were in Danbury, I was able to get the rooftop of an RDC pretty easily because there's a wide concrete platform there. So I was able to stand back far enough and I was able to get a good shot of the roof.
Mhm. Now, can you if you were scanning the side of a car, for instance, and couldn't get back to get the whole car in, can you move along the side of the car while you're scanning? Or
Yes. Yeah, you
okay.
can walk alongside it. And that's what I do in this case. Most of what I did at Seashore was I would shoot the front and then the side. If you try to get it all in one, sometimes the camera will forget and you'll get a little ripple in it. But it's always better to do it in pieces.
I was going to ask how much the LiDAR equipment costs, but it's basically the cost of the phone. So what's the software that you would use on that?
Okay, I use SketchUp and Scaniverse.
So that does the LiDAR scanning as well as the
Yes.
other stuff too. Interesting. Someone's asking, any luck for the Android phone, folks?
No, not that I know of, but you never know. I mean, there may be other products that do LiDAR depending on how much it takes off.
Yeah. All right, so for the time being, then you're kind of limited to
Apple.
dealing with Apple. Yeah. Okay. Are there commercial LiDAR tools available?
I'm sure there are. I don't know what those would cost. I know you do see, Rapido, they do a lot of videos showing their scanners. I think some of those are in the $10,000 range.
Little out of the cost for us, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever put you on to doing LiDAR scanning? It's kind of, I mean, I know LiDAR, and I think a lot of people out there do know LiDAR from watching programs on the Science Channel or whatever, where they scan forests from a helicopter. But thinking about using the same technology for scanning trains is kind of interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Actually, I had seen a video about a city that was buried probably about 5,000 years ago, and they were able to use LiDAR to remap some of the streets through the forest. And then I saw an Apple commercial. So then I just kind of put two and two together. I said, oh, I wonder if that's the same one that they did on the show to find this ancient city. And then I said, oh, Apple's doing a LiDAR scanner. Let's see what it does. And that's kind of how I got into it.
Huh. Interesting. Another question. Do you have a model railroad, and how big is it, if you do?
I do. I'm building a post-Conrail short line called the Mitchellsville branch. It's a 16x6 with a 4-foot extension on one side. And it takes place in the late 90s, particularly 96 to 97, when we were getting down to the NS CSX split up of Conrail. And that video that you saw where the subway car was running, that was actually shot on my layout. That was a test. It's about, I'm going to say, pushing about 50% done right now. And hopefully in the next few years, it should be completed.
Cool. And let's see, I got how much work does it take to clean up the stringing in the model?
Not much at all, just regular files. And you just file it down, and a little sandpaper, a little filing. It's really not that bad. I mean, especially for transit equipment, which is much smaller. Sometimes, there is a case where you may have to add supports and then trim those out. But for this car, I didn't have any problems at all. It was actually a really easy car to do.
Yeah, I noticed that with the flat sides, it was probably a lot easier to get something into the format you need for 3D printer. How much more work would it be if the car sides were rounded, or if you were doing the nose of a locomotive to get that rounding in there? Does that make it a lot more difficult?
That's going to be an interesting thing to see with the Boston car, because it's not square like the Market Frankfurt car was. So this may be a case where I may need to print the sides flat and then put tabs in it so I can actually assemble the car that way. So that car, I'm going to say, should be ready by St. Louis, and I should have that car ready to go there in St. Louis.
Very good. And I think that pretty much covers the questions that we had. I want to thank you very much for presenting a really interesting subject. I concede that over the next few years, that's probably going to go a long ways, and going to make it easier for us to get models that we might not otherwise have a chance to get.
And the one thing I hadn't mentioned is that you can actually use this on buildings. So if you have like a station in your town that you want to model, you can go and walk around the building with the LiDAR, and all the work is done. So, the days of graph paper and pencil are pretty much over. And the thing is, you have that forever, so you can just keep referring back to it over and over again. That's really where the benefit of this technology, because I live in Long Island, and Kennebunkport's probably, if I forgot something and had to drive back up there, probably about a 7-hour drive, give or take. So it's a huge advantage. It's a great piece of equipment to have.
Yep. Well, I can think of all kinds of uses for it. And then, of course, the only question now is the time it takes to learn the software and stuff, I guess.
Well, hopefully it's something that'll become more commonplace, and then you'll see more products available.
Yeah, well, I suspect it will, because it certainly has a lot of potential. Well, thank you very much, John.
Anytime.
We do appreciate it.
Anytime.
And Speed. All right, so would like to take this time to thank everybody that sent in submissions for the model showcase. We have a little bit of time here, and what we're going to do is we're going to play all of the model showcase submissions once more, so that everybody gets a chance to see them, and we hope you enjoy that. So Speed, when you're ready, take it away.
Welcome to part 1 of the 2022 edition of the NERx Model Showcase. Each night, we will look at some of the models submitted for the showcase, and over the course of all 4 nights, you will have the opportunity to see them all. Let's enjoy part 1. With tonight's roundtable discussion on women in model railroading, it seemed appropriate to see what a few women shared for tonight's edition of the Model Showcase. First up is this HO scale scratch-built boxcar being built by Jean Spalte, a Lakeshores Division member. Jean has never built a railroad model before, and a Roundtable Build It clinic kindled her interest. You can see the progress she has made on the model to date after 4 sessions. Jean's husband Gordon is also building a model of the boxcar. Speaking of Gordon, here's a pair of photos of an HO scale station, the Quebec Junction Depot, that he scratch built. The model uses Tichy windows and people doors, however the baggage doors are scratch built. The station platform is board-by-board balsa wood stained with an alcohol ink solution. The roof is illustration board covered with painted newsprint paper and sponge to finish it. And interior lighting was added to show off interior detail in the baggage room. After tonight's roundtable discussion on women in model railroading, we share the work of Sue Osberg, one of its panelists. Sue is the superintendent of the Little Roadie Division. The first model Sue shares with us is an HO scale Seckler's cold storage kit by Bar Mills. Sue also constructed this fine-scale miniatures kit, Elijah Roth and Sons. Here is another angle of Sue's model showing the watermill. Sue also models N-Scale. This is a scratch-built church for an N-Scale T-track module. The module is part of the local T-track layout, the Rhode Island and Old Colony Railroad. Rich Newmiller, a master model railroader from the Garden State Division, shares his latest project, the scratch-built Glenside Lumber and Coal Company in HO scale. Rich used to pass by this lumber yard during his commute to a job in Center City, Philadelphia. In fact, Rich bought the lumber used for his first house from this lumber yard. He got the idea to replicate the complex on his model railroad and is scratch building it. All 3 photos are the interior of the main building. That's it for part 1 of the NERx Model Showcase. Part 2 of the showcase will air tomorrow evening. Welcome to part 2 of the 2022 edition of the NERx Model Showcase. Each night we will look at some of the models submitted for the showcase, and over the course of all 4 nights you will have the opportunity to see them all. Let's enjoy part 2. Dave Doerr of the Lakeshores Division Model 3 Reading Railroad F3As. Note the differences in the prototypically correct nose details in Dave's 3 models, beginning with engine number 260. Here is Reading Railroad F3A engine number 263. Dave modeled half of the Reading Railroad's fleet of F3As as they appeared in the 1960s to 1963 range. The third model Dave built is Reading Railroad F3A engine 265. All 3 models began as 1990s vintage Stewart models. Jim Roth, a Hudson Berkshire Division member, took a train ride across Panama with his wife a few years ago. On the Pacific end of the trip, he found this old 2-dome 30-foot tank car next to the station. Jim had HO scale model die casting kits for the old-time 6,000-gallon tank car based on the Van Dyke 1906 design. Using 2 kits, he cut the tanks into dome sections and 2 end pieces. After gluing the dome pieces together, he was able to figure out how much to shorten the end pieces and keep the length of the tank at 30 feet. Jim covered the joints in the tank with homemade plastic rivet strips. The car is finished except for weathering. Dave Inslee of the Hub Division built this HO scale toolkit, a kit by Sierra West scale models. For this model, instead of gluing or soldering magnet wires to nano LEDs, he decided to give the Woodland Scenics Just Plug lights a try, which was super easy. The kit came with fantastic detail castings. The kit did not call for exposing the interior, but since the kit came with nice laser-cut interior framing, Dave decided the interior needed to be seen. The kit directions included a couple interesting techniques, one of which was staining the wood. The kit called for brushing diluted flocal grime onto the wood and then distressing the boards with a brass wire brush. The result is wood that really has a nice gray finish. Ed O'Rourke, a master model railroader in the Central New York Division, shares this photo he used for inspiration of trucks on a flat car he built. The photo shows a New Haven car float in the 1950s. Ed had the flat car for a while, and it may be an Atlas product. The trucks are Ford 1952 cab resin kits by Sylvan scale models. Ed scratch built the flatbeds and used some fencing for the stakes sitting on the beds. We hope you enjoyed part 2 of the NERx Model Showcase. Tomorrow night, you can see part 3. Welcome to part 3 of the 2022 edition of the NERx Model Showcase. Each night, we will look at some of the models submitted for the showcase, and over the course of all 4 nights, you will have an opportunity to see them all. Let's enjoy part 3. Because tonight's roundtable discussion focuses on N-scale, we thought we should highlight N-scale entries submitted to this year's NERx Model Showcase. First up, Doug Diederich, an N-scale modeler from the Hudson Berkshire Division, scratch-built this snow shed. In this view, you can see the snow shed beginning to take shape with the roof half finished. Here is the finished model of the snow shed prior to installing it on Doug's layout. This scene on Doug's N-scale Great Northern Railroad shows the completed snow shed in its new home. John Becker is an N-scale modeler, a member of the Lakeshores Division. His first model is a 3-inch by 5-inch switch tower diorama. The main tower came from his collection of railroad-oriented structure models. John's second model is this N-scale Mitchell dwelling kit from Creative Laser Design. Overall, this model is 2.5 by 1 3/4 inches. Two nights ago, we saw Gordon Spalte's scratch-built station. Tonight, Gordon shares his HO scale Turner Creamery. The model was scratch built and includes Tichy windows and doors. The roof is evergreen metal roofing. Gordon printed the sign on an inkjet printer, sealed and sanded it thin, and glued it to the building's side. The model includes a detailed boiler room interior. Chuck Dellaiacono, a master model railroader in the Garden State Division, constructed this first-timers bar hydrocal kit by Downtown Deco as part of a make and take clinic. The clinic was presented by master model railroader Clark Kooning at a Western New York Division meeting. Chuck is friends with Clark and Andy McVie, the superintendent of the Western New York Division, a division of the Niagara Frontier region. Chuck created his own signage for the HO scale model, naming the bar for Andy and also including a Clark bar sign for Clark. This kit is intended for modelers to discover that working with hydrocal kits is fun and easy. This ends part 3 of the NERx Model Showcase. The final installment will be shown tomorrow evening. Welcome to the final installment of the 2022 edition of the NERx Model Showcase. Each night, we will look at some of the models submitted for the showcase, and over the course of all 4 nights, you will have the opportunity to see them all. Let's enjoy part 4. Roger Post, a new NMRA member from the Garden State Division, kit bashed an HO scale Walther's bay window caboose kit into a snow flanger. In this photo, you can see the flanger blades Roger cut, bent, and shaped from a Coca-Cola can. Roger made modifications to the caboose body to accommodate the changes to the car floor. He also modified the window openings and added other details to the car. With the modifications completed, Roger finished the model by painting and decaling it for the Canadian National and is now ready for service. Two nights ago, we highlighted Ed O'Rourke's trucks on a flat car. Tonight, Ed shares his HO scale 10,000-gallon Tichy tank car masquerading as a New Haven 8,000-gallon K29 tank car. Behind the car is a scratch-built brick water tank. Yesterday, you saw Chuck Dellaiacono's Old-Timers Bar hydrocal model. Today, we share Chuck's HO scale Finaro and Camerlengo horizontal ribbed hopper resin kit. This kit is a one-piece body and was used for a clinic at the 2018 Northeastern Regions Convention. Chuck bent his own grab irons and cut levers for the model. He used a brake wheel from Tichy, stirrup steps from A-Line, and added L-girders and rivets to the slope sheet brace on the interior to create a stronger bond with the car. Chuck also scratch-built the brake levers, rods, and brake lines seen on the underside of the car. This scene was created by Ron Hoas and Garden State Division member Andy Rubo for Andy's HO scale Pennsylvania Railroad New York Division layout. Ron scratch-built the tower as well as cut the cardstock material for the substation trusses on a Cameo silhouette machine. Russ Norris, a master model railroader from the Hub Division, shared recent scenery work on his HON3 East Broadtop layout. He constructed a spur that curves around a mountain and passes through 3 different scenes. The first scene is a 1920s logging site. The middle scene is an ore tipple for a high-grade silica ore known as Ganister rock. The ore was used in steel furnaces and other high-temperature applications. The track continues to rise and curve around the mountain until they end at the East Broadtop coal dock at the Rock Hill Shops, a scene that would have been typical from the early 20th century through today. That ends the NERx Model Showcase for the 2022 NERx Virtual Convention. The NERx team thanks everyone that shared their work.
All right, so we're back again, and I have with me now Dave Inslee, who is the NER convention chairman, permanent convention chairman. And we thought we'd kind of give you a little update on the upcoming Connecticut Yankee convention in Windsor, Connecticut on September 15th to 18th. So Dave, what have they got in store for us down there? Anything good?
Yeah, so a lot going on in Connecticut. Besides the, a lot of really great layouts in that area. So plenty to see layout wise. We always have a great set of clinicians and clinic lineups to go. So that'll be, typical of any NER convention. But in the immediate area, we're going to have Connecticut Trolley Museum, Eastern Railroad Museum. Got the Essex Steam Train about 45 minutes away. We're not too far from Springfield, Massachusetts. I think with the Big E is running that same weekend, so there'll be a lot of activities going on just north of us. The Railroad Heritage Museum is about 35 miles away, so plenty of action. The Connecticut DOT now has a lot of commuter rails running between Hartford and New Haven, so a lot more rail activity even in that general area. So we should have a good lineup for folks.
Sounds good. Any insight on some of the clinics? Have you heard anything on that, or?
I haven't yet. So the team is working hard to
Yep.
put the planning together. We're about to release the registration form, so I think that should be out within the next several weeks. So really encourage people to take a look at the website and then stay up to date with that. And then Chuck Diljack, our crack marketing team, is going to be getting lots of information out through the email blast as well. So look for that coming up pretty soon.
And the convention website is
NER-conventions.org is the convention website. So you'll have a button right on the homepage for the Connecticut Yankee.
very good. So everybody get out there and check out the website and get ready to get your reservations in, and we'll look forward to seeing you all in Windsor, Connecticut in the fall.
Yeah, we did a model showcase here, so obviously in the convention we'll have not only a showcase but also the contest models and the photography contest. So
right, and the contest models and in particular and in the photo contest too. That's always something that's good to see, and kind of gives you some incentive to get the juices going and get out there and do some modeling yourself. So
right, a lot of great work to showcase.
Yep, very good. All right, thanks, Dave. And what we're going to do now, I think, is we're going to go to the layout tour. We have Rick Abramson coming up, showing us his New Haven Railroad. And I was going to make a comment back when we had the editors on, because Max Brisbane held up a cover of the new coupler that had a photo on there of Rick Abramson's New Haven layout. So you probably won't see that exact photo, but you'll get a chance to see the layout that the photo came from. So Speed, when you're ready, go ahead and run it.
Rick Abramson grew up in New Haven territory, then worked as an engineer, mostly on the shoreline between New York City and Boston. He modeled Bridgeport to Devon, Connecticut in a feature-packed 12.5 by 19.5 foot layout. His first article was in the August 2004 Model Railroader. Rick moved it, overhead wire and all, to a new house. The new space had room for the Devon drawbridge. Another article appeared in December 2020 Railroad Model Craftsman as the job neared completion. I'd built a camera car which did a good job of recording layouts. I asked Rick about doing a cab ride for an NERx event, and he agreed. Here we go, starting at SS 62 on the main line. Rick's electric locomotives all run with the pantograph up and touching the wire, though they don't draw power from it. Now we cross the Devon drawbridge, the model that Rick built as he was expanding the layout in his new house. Right after the bridge is the Y at Devon, controlled by SS 71 on the left. Then the Devon passenger station. Now we're coming up on SS 73, Woodmont, and the future industrial area at East Bridgeport. Approaching SS 55 Burr Road, we meet an EP5 with what looks like a Springfield train. Now we finish our run around the main line at SS 62. Next, the modeled portion of the Poughkeepsie Bridge freight route, SS 199 Berkshire Junction to SS B 253 Derby Junction and Derby, Connecticut. Crossing over to take the shorter route to Derby. All clear at the diamond crossing ahead. Diamond crossing with an industrial track. Meeting an RDC at SSB 253 Derby Junction. Passing Derby Station. Next, we have a short round trip with street running through an industrial landscape. SS 62 on the main line to Seaview Avenue and return. All clear at the Diamond Crossing. At the end of track after the Sprague meter factory, we change ends and return to the main. Finally, a run around the freight route through Cannondale, Devon, and diverging towards Derby, then around again to the main line for a trip through Devon and Bridgeport. Passing Cannondale, proceed signal at SS 62, Central Avenue. Crossing over to take a diverging route at Devon. Taking the route towards Derby at Derby Junction. passing Derby, back to Berkshire Junction, Central Ave again, straight route at Devon past SS 71 and the passenger depot. One of the New Haven's massive anchor bridges is ahead as we cross over to the express track at Woodmont. Through the industrial landscape of East Bridgeport, the crossbars between catenary towers accurately follow New Haven prototype. Here comes an EP5 jet with a passenger train. Passing SS-55 Burr Road for the last time. I really enjoyed working with Rick and seeing his layout in this way. I had a couple of trips over this part of the shoreline while it was still New York, New Haven, and Hartford, and remember many of the things Rick grew up with. Thank you all for your interest. I hope you enjoyed this presentation.
All righty. Well, thanks to Rich Abramson for that nice look at his New Haven layout under the wire. Catenary is something we don't see a lot of on a model railroad, but it looked real neat. So I guess that's it for this year's NERx. I hope you all enjoyed the programs as much as we have. I would like to thank all of our presenters and layout owners for their efforts in developing and making their presentations. I also would like to thank the members of our committee for giving of their time to make NERx possible, including Chuck Diljak, John During, Dave Inslee, Ed Olszewski, Ed O'Rourke, James Van Bocklin, Dave Durr, Artie Crass, Mark Moritz, Greg Williams, and hello from myself. And special thanks to Speed and Brad Anderson from the NMRA team for their help and guidance and the behind the scenes work that they do in getting the studio up and running so that we can put this out to you guys. So many thanks, Speed and Brad. We do appreciate it. And then finally, before we go, a plug for the next NMRA-X program on April 23rd. The program is going to feature 5 of our own NER members: Mike Tylick, Craig Biscaya, Chuck Diljak, Steve Gothy, and Ed O'Connell. So be sure to tune in on the 23rd of April and check out what's going on there. So thank you all for being part of this annual NERx program. I hope you all had a good time, and we'll look forward to seeing you all at the Fall Convention in Connecticut. Thanks a lot. Have a good night. We'll see you all next time.